Good morning and welcome to the Seminole County Board of County Commission meeting, April 22nd, 2025. It is now approximately 9:30. We are going to have the Pledge of Allegiance and invocation first. Mr. Kurt Slavkowski will be our pastor this morning from SGTV to give the invocation, and then I will ask Commissioner Lockhart to lead us in the pledge.
All right. Please join me in prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Heavenly Father, we give you praise and glory for the gift of life that you have given each of us. We are so blessed to enjoy all Seminole County's natural beauty and green spaces that are the treasure of this county. Give wisdom and discernment to our commissioners and staff today as they look to find ways to safeguard these natural lands and resources to continue to make Seminole County a premier place to live, work, and play. We pray, dear Lord, for the soul of Pope Francis and eagerly await the new appointment of the next Pope to lead the Holy Catholic Church in these times. We thank you for your unconditional love for us and the sacrifice of your Son, our Lord Jesus Christ, for the forgiveness of our sins and eternal life in his name. Help us to love our neighbor as ourselves and be quick to help those in need. Please protect our veterans serving our country and all in public safety who leave their loved ones each day seeking to protect the lives of others. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. Amen.
Please join me in the pledge. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Kurt. Thank you, Commissioner Lockhart. If everybody would just take a moment and make sure your cell phones and electronic devices are silenced, we'd appreciate that. Now we're going to move into our awards and proclamations segment of the meeting. This will be the proclamation proclaiming Sergeant Bryant Ortiz, United States Army, as Seminole County's Veteran of the Month. This will be read by Commissioner Herr.
Thank you, Chairman. It is my honor to move the following proclamation of the Seminole County Board of County Commissioners recognizing United States Army Sergeant Bryant Ortiz for his outstanding service to the United States and to Seminole County. Whereas the brave men and women of our Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, Coast Guard, and Space Force demonstrate the resolute spirit and unmatched selflessness, reminding us there are few things more American than giving of ourselves to make a difference in the lives of others. And whereas, throughout our country's history, generations of service members have answered the call to leave their families, their jobs, and put their futures and even their lives on the line to valiantly defend our nation. And whereas, for many service members, the sacrifice has ended in permanent injury or death, yet their spirit remains in the continued preservation of our freedoms and the promise of liberty. And whereas there are more than 30,000 living veterans in Seminole County who served our nation in times of peace and war. Through their service, they kept America strong. And whereas Sergeant Bryant Ortiz served in the U.S. Army honorably between 2012 and 2018 as an infantryman, where he earned his Combat Infantryman's badge for his deployment to Afghanistan. He also participated in operations in Latvia and Estonia as part of Operation Inherent Resolve, facing Russian aggression following the annexation of Crimea. His accolades include multiple Army Commendation Medals, Army Achievement Medals, NATO Service Ribbon, and the Afghanistan Campaign Medal, among others. And whereas Sergeant Bryant Ortiz, a Seminole County native, has been deeply involved with the community prior to and after his military service. He has dedicated over 500 hours of community service, earning recognition from Senator Harry Reid, Senator Mitch McConnell, and former Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, and earning the Jefferson Award for Outstanding Community Service. Upon his return to Seminole County in 2021, he served as a deputy with the Seminole County Sheriff's Office, earning Deputy of the Quarter and multiple memorandums of recognition. He now dedicates his life to serving as the congressional aide to Congressman Daniel Webster and the constituents of Florida's 11th Congressional District. And whereas Sergeant Bryant Ortiz has brought great credit and distinction upon himself, the United States of America, the United States Army, and Seminole County. Now therefore be it proclaimed that we, the Board of County Commissioners of Seminole County, Florida, express our gratitude, admiration, and respect for Sergeant Bryant Ortiz for his outstanding service to the United States Army and the residents of Seminole County. Be it further proclaimed that this proclamation is presented to Sergeant Bryant Ortiz along with our sincere congratulations and recognition as Seminole County's Veteran of the Month, adopted this 22nd day of April 2025.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. See none, carries unanimously. Thank you, Sergeant. We appreciate it very much. Sergeant, if you'll be patient with us, we'll get through the next proclamation. We'll ask everybody to come up for photos and receive the award. We appreciate you very much. Next up is going to be read by Commissioner Constantine. This is a proclamation for National Travel and Tourism Week in Seminole County. Commissioner?
Thank you very much, and thank you for Robert for these wonderful pineapples. They will go to good use. This is a proclamation of the Board of Seminole County Commissioners proclaiming May 4th through May 10th as National Travel and Tourism Week in Seminole County, and I move the above motion. Whereas the travel and tourism industry plays a vital role in the strengthening Seminole County's economy, generating revenue, creating employment opportunities, and enhancing the overall quality of life for residents and visitors alike. And whereas tourism generates over $4.1 billion in economic impact for Seminole County and supports approximately 26,200 jobs for our local residents in 2023. And whereas Seminole County has emerged as a premier destination for sports tourism, welcoming athletes, teams, and spectators for tournaments, training, and events that energize the local economy and showcase the region's top-tier facilities and hospitality. And whereas the county's abundant natural beauty, including the scenic rivers, lush parks, and protected wildlife areas, continues to draw nature enthusiasts, outdoor adventurers, and ecotourists, reinforcing Seminole County's reputation as Florida's natural choice. And whereas tourism in Seminole County provided more than $320 million in state and local taxes in 2023, which resulted in nearly 1,700 in annual tax savings for each family household. And whereas the strong partnerships between the Central Florida Hotel and Lodging Association, local businesses, government leaders, and community stakeholders remain critical to fostering a thriving tourism economy and ensuring Seminole County remains a warm, inviting place for visitors year-round. And whereas the Central Florida Hotel and Lodging Association is the largest regional hospitality association in the United States, representing more than 129,500 hotel rooms throughout the Central Florida region, as well as nearly 500 supplier organizations that do business with the hospitality and tourism industries. And whereas the National Travel and Tourism Week offers a meaningful opportunity in 2025 to honor the accomplishments of Seminole County's travel and tourism community, highlight the continued efforts of the Central Florida Hotel and Lodging Association and its partners, and reaffirm our dedication to growing the county's presence as a must-visit destination. I now, therefore, be it proclaimed that we, the Seminole County Board of County Commissioners, do hereby proclaim May 4th through May 10th, 2025 as the National Travel and Tourism Week in Seminole County, and encourage residents to celebrate National Travel and Tourism Week, support workforce development in the hospitality and tourism industries, and participate in the local initiatives highlighting travel's importance to our community's economic growth and quality of life.
Second.
Motion and second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed, like sign. Seeing none, carries unanimous. Congratulations. Thank you very much. All right, if Sergeant Ortiz and the commission would join us down on the floor for some pictures and hand over the proclamation, and then the Hotel Lodging Association, Mr. Robert Abruzzo, if you'd follow up next.
I want to bring the whole team into it.
Okay. We'll let Sergeant Ortiz.
Oh, well, sorry.
No, you go ahead.
Okay, come on. Come on, we're going to yeah, first.
Oh,
I brought one. Say the Uman out, Commissioner Costa. There it is. All right. Okay, all right. Got everyone in here? Good? Perfect. Yes, that's perfect. That's perfect. See everyone?
Just making sure I can see everybody's faces. All right, right here on my count in 3, 2, 1.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Congratulations.
Okay, Sergeant, please proceed.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Chairman, and good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. I want to begin by expressing my heartfelt gratitude, not just to the Holy God himself for allowing me to be here today, but to also my family as well. Regrettably, my 7-month-old is battling a 100-degree fever this morning, so my family is unable to be here this morning, but I also wish to express and extend my sincere thanks to each of you present here. Growing up in the vibrant community of Seminole County has gifted me with countless cherished opportunities and memories that I hold close to my heart. Over the past 2 decades, I have been continually impressed by the remarkable growth and development that our county has experienced. This transformation is not just a testament to our population increase, but also reflects the strong sense of community and commitment to progress that defines Seminole County. It's essential to acknowledge that the thriving environment we enjoy here is a direct result of our residents and the unwavering leadership from our Seminole County Board of County Commissioners, who diligently advocate for the interests and financial well-being of our residents. In my previous role as a deputy sheriff with the Seminole County Sheriff's Office, I witnessed firsthand the profound collaboration between our dedicated sheriff and the county commissioners. I understand that at times difficult choices must be made, yet I have seen you all make strategic, thoughtful decisions that undoubtedly enhance the overall quality of life and safeguard the public safety of everyone living in Seminole County. For this, I offer my heartfelt thanks to the Seminole County Commissioners for this recognition. My family and I are proud to be Seminole County residents, and may God bless each and every single one of you for your ongoing commitment to serving our wonderful community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Sergeant, and we appreciate your service. Mr. Abruzzo, would you care to make a few comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. It is a delight to be here today, and thank you so much for your continued support with the tourism and hospitality industry. It's no secret that we've been working very collaboratively over the last several years, at least for the last almost 4 years together, but it goes back even times before that, and I do appreciate the continued partnership with us. I'm very excited about the new TID that we just recently approved and what that's going to come for the future of this community. It is going to be a game changer for us, especially in sports tourism, which has really been the investment that we've all been working collaboratively together. So I want to say thank you so much for your continued partnership, and I'm excited about the future of us working together on the benefit, for the benefit not only of the industry, but also for our community here in Seminole County. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, sir. Sincerely appreciate it. All right, next up, we are going to move to our County Investment Advisor Report, Mr. Scott McIntyre, who is with us live today. Welcome, Mr. McIntyre.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Okay, let's see. Since the last time we were here,
Take a deep breath. It's okay.
Yeah.
You got to say that every morning these days.
Kind of have to stay. It's remarkable. I was here virtually last time, and the tariffs had not gone into place. So the landscape has completely changed. And the landscape going forward is going to depend on how long the tariffs are in place and to what extent they're in place. And all of that is completely unknowable at this point. In my mind, the U.S. and China are both not in position to back off anytime soon. It just doesn't feel like a deal is going to get made in the near term. So I think we can expect a slowdown in the economy. I think we can expect higher prices when they show up. I'm not real sure, but I certainly expect that they will. So the latest thing that's happened, if you're following the news, is something that we've expected for a long time, and that's the idea that the president was going to pressure the Fed chairman to lower rates in response to the economy slowing. And there's a real need for the Fed to be independent. There's a real need for a central bank not to take direction from the leader of a country. So the financial markets have gotten up in arms about that. And it's not whether or not Trump will be able to or will want to fire Powell before his term ends next May. The question is whether or not the financial market is going to feel disruption as a result of the president undermining the Fed chairman. So, I mean, that's an ongoing situation. It unnerves me a little bit. I think the financial markets have reacted to this already, and the longer it goes on, you're going to see more volatility. You're going to see more days where the stock market is up or down more than we're comfortable with. We're going to see situations where especially long interest rates are moving higher, which is counterintuitive to the idea that interest rates are likely to be cut. I think it's a danger for, even if the economy does slow down, I think it's a danger for the Fed chairman to react quickly. I think that the earliest rate cuts will come is probably the end of July. 2 meetings between now and then. And I think the Fed is really going to have to see some evidence of the economy slowing, and they're going to have to really watch prices to see what happens. So they're not in a position where they can react as quickly as the president would like. So again, every day is a new day. Literally every day is a new day. I was looking at what was going on in the market before I stepped up here, and if you see me on my phone, it's not that I'm on Facebook or talking to my wife. It's taking a quick look at the market. So anyway, most of the data that's come out has been okay. The last labor market report was fairly strong. Believe it or not, inflation is trending lower, sharply lower. A lot of that has to do with housing. That's a big reason why prices are high is shelter costs, and they have been moving downward, and they will move downward. The question is going to be goods prices, and we'll see that reflected in the next couple of months as this trade war really begins to kick in. I think I pretty much covered everything, and I think the bottom line is the uncertainty right now. And I think the uncertainty, I was talking to the chairman on our regular call before this, and one of the things that worries me about the uncertainty is from a businessman's perspective. What do we do? How do we address the idea that we're running blind here? Do we order 6 months ahead? Do we not order at all? I can tell you right now that anecdotally, we're understanding that ships are turning around in port. The idea of ordering $1 billion worth of goods, having them come into port, and paying, if they're from China, $2.5 billion to receive that shipment is not something that businesses are going to be willing to do. So we're in a state of flux right now. It doesn't make me real happy. I'm sure there's some traders in Wall Street that are thrilled with the volatility, but most of us don't like it one bit. This just gives you an idea of where the economy was. So fourth quarter revised 2.4, 2.5% for the fourth quarter. Rolling forward into the first quarter, it appears as though right now GDP is negative for the first quarter, ending obviously March 31st, but we need data to come in to confirm this. I don't think that's going to happen. I think it's going to be really soft, but I don't think it'll be negative. And again, don't know. We'll get the first GDP reading subject to 2 revisions next week. So everybody will keep an eye on that. I don't think the markets will like to see a negative number if it shows up, but again, I think it'll be soft. I don't think it'll be negative. This is the 2-year. The reason I'm showing you this is because you did a lot of buying in December, a lot of buying in January, and fortunately, this is the last 6 months. You can see kind of right in the middle is where you did the buying. You bought out, the clerk's office made purchases out in the 2 to 3 year sector. Threw it all out there. Kind of holding your breath on that a little bit. Normally, the county doesn't go out this far, but that's locked in. So it affords us the luxury right now of waiting, and that's what we're going to do. Now, having said that, we've got about almost 50% is extended out beyond, which again I think is unusual. It affords us the luxury, but you're also in a drain period. Looking at the interest rates, if you can see it over the course of the last 4 meetings, they've come down, down, down. The 2-year Treasury actually got down to 350 several weeks ago during one particularly choppy day. Most of the investments that were made were in the roughly 425 area when you did all the investment that you've done. Again, we believe the Fed's going to cut overnight rates, but we don't believe that's going to be till July. Again, every day is a new day, so don't set your watch by that, but that's our expectation. So upcoming maturities, you've got one maturity coming up within 2 to 3 weeks. You also have a sheriff's draw that the clerk's office made me aware of about $14.1 million on the 1st of May. So essentially, the maturity that's in front of us is essentially going to be used to cover that sheriff's draw. Again, you're in a drain period. There's no reason to take what amounts to about 15% of the portfolio is liquid. 85% has been invested right now. You're in a period where you're spending, so that percentage is going to stay roughly the same. I don't like a portfolio to be significantly less than, say, 10 to 12 max, and you're to the point where, given the maturities that are coming up, given what your expenses are, given that you have the sheriff's draw, there's no reason to invest from here. We have a couple of late maturities in May, which we'll address at the next meeting. Your overall portfolio yield is 4.44 right now. Again, these are short fixed income, mostly treasuries, very conservative, highly rated. You don't have any commercial paper. So 4.44, given the fact that the 2 years at 3.77 is a pretty good position. So I wish I had more in terms of exciting investments coming up, but essentially that's not what we're doing right now. But you're in a good position. The market is not. Every day is a new day. I'll see you in May, and we'll address those longer maturities then. Any questions?
Mr. Chairman. None? Commissioner Laurie.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion to implement the recommendations of our financial advisor based on the report submitted here today, and recommend the clerk to implement said board recommendations as presented.
Second.
Motion is second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed, like sign. Seeing none, carries unanimous. Thank you, Mr. McIntyre.
Thank you all.
Safe travels. All right, next up is our annual comprehensive financial report for the fiscal year ended September 30th, 2024. We will have Ms. Jenny Spencer from the clerk's office and Mr. Dan O'Keefe presenting today.
Good morning, Commissioners. We are happy to report that we were able to meet our March 31st deadline this year, and you should have received the actual report to give you adequate time to review it and be ready for questions. With that, I'll turn it over to Dan O'Keefe, the audit partner, and with him is Alan Rickerford. He's the senior manager on the engagement.
Thank you, Ms. Spencer.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So Alan doesn't get to normally come to these things, but I thought it'd be appropriate to bring him since he's the one that does most of the work in this engagement and does all the heavy lifting, and I wanted him to have a little FaceTime with you so he could get some credit too. But he's one of my best managers in the firm, and he does quite a few of these audits, not just Seminole County, but he's quite busy during busy season. I got an interesting presentation for you today. I spent all weekend putting this together, so as you were enjoying this beautiful weather, I was in front of my computer doing a lot of research and digging through multiple financial reports, and so you can imagine I was having a lot of fun. So
We know you love it.
yeah, I do. I do love it. So let me get through, kind of the part related to our output, which is the actual reports that we produce for you. And we put a letter out there that I think you've already received. It has some required communications in it that covers these particular areas. And these are our deliverables that are addressed in that document. And we've put the page reference on here for you that gets you to the actual pages of the comprehensive annual report. And if you're looking at a PDF, it gives you the PDF references too, which makes it a little bit easier. So the first report is actual to report on the financial statements themselves, and it is unmodified, which we also refer to as a clean opinion. You'll see a report on internal control over financial reporting and compliance. This is required under government auditing standards, which we're required to follow. And also, there's a examination of your investment compliance, which is required by Florida statutes. All of these, no findings, no significant areas of concern, and certainly the type of report you want to receive. There's a management letter in there. This is required by the rules of the Auditor General. There's a lot of information in there that kind of goes beyond any type of findings that's required by Florida statutes. One of them is doing a kind of a risk assessment, if you will, a financial condition assessment that's required by Florida statutes. And that's where we compare you to your peer counties and see kind of where you're at. The only problem with that is a lot of the information that we're comparing to is a little outdated, and I wish they could get this more current than it is, but still we have to go through it, we're required to. And then you have the federal single audit requirements and state single audit requirements that are addressed in this particular report. And you have, quite a few, but we didn't have any compliance findings and or internal control findings on your major grants. So this is the section, I spent, I do a presentation similar to this for accounting conferences and finance conferences. I've done it around the country. And this is a shortened version, version that I put together just specifically for you. And but again, it's a lot of financial information going through. So I started with the federal government's comprehensive annual financial report, which is June 30th, 2024. Yes, they have an audited report. No, they do not get an unmodified opinion. The Department of Defense, for example, since they've been doing these audits, has never had an unmodified opinion. And I'm not really certain why that is, but it's a little nerve-wracking if you think about it. It's like, why didn't the Department of Defense get an opinion? But let me walk you through some key areas in this report. First off, I want you to appreciate my graphics. I used ChatGPT to help me develop these, and I basically told it, said, give me a representation of something that looks really bad for debt. And this is what I came up with. So, what is the national debt of the U.S. government? Well, the number you see kind of advertised and talked about is $36.7 trillion. But, as I said, there's a set of financial statements you can go to that are audited, and you look in that document, and it's $45.5 trillion. Now, last year is the first time the federal government started to put in the unfunded liabilities for their federal pensions, veteran benefits, and post-retirement health benefits. They never did that before. And what's interesting is the U.S. government has its own standard-setting body. It's called the Federal Accounting Standards Advisory Board. So you have the Government Accounting Standards Board, which applies to state and local governments, and the feds have its own standard-setting board. But they've been getting pressured for years that they're not putting these unfunded liabilities in. So if you look at their statements that are audited, it's $45.5 trillion. Well, that still doesn't tell the whole story of the national debt, because what's not in there is the unfunded liabilities of Social Security and Medicare A. Now, that's in their note disclosures, and you have to dig through hundreds of pages to find this number, but I was able to do it. When you add that number in, really the national debt is more like $73.5 trillion. Now think about this for a second. The number trillion. We didn't even know what a trillion was until, 25 years ago or so. It started to kind of eke into our systems, and we used to be talking about billions, the national debt in billions. But if you sat here and counted to a trillion, it would take you over 30,000 years. It's a big number. Now, that's a math equation, so I put a challenge out there to anybody who wants to do this. And if you're counting the number, consider each time you count the number, it's 1 second. Of course, if you get it to a larger number, it's going to take you longer than that. But 30,000, I don't think any of us have 30,000 years to mess around with. The other area that is concerning is the amount of household debt. It's at its highest point, which is $18 trillion. Now, compare that to the U.S. GDP, which is $29 trillion. I mean, that's almost half of the GDP. But more concerning is the national debt is 247% of GDP if you consider that $73.5 trillion number. So why do I even put this in here? I put this in here because we know that there's going to be cuts at the federal level. And quite frankly, there has to be. They can't just kind of keep on spending the way they are and not make cuts. But there's some arguments in terms of what needs to be cut and how it needs to be cut. So what makes up the national debt? Well, $7.9 trillion is owed to other countries, and actually that's been coming down, interestingly enough. And 21.7 is held by the public. That would be individuals, corporations, mutual funds, hedge funds, pension plans, and so on and so forth. And then this number right here, $7.1 trillion. That's intergovernmental. Now here's what a lot of people don't understand. The federal government has about 20 trust funds that it manages, the biggest ones being Social Security, Medicare, and the federal pension plans. By law, they have to invest in federal securities, by law. So they can't invest in anything else. So what's the federal securities of the federal government? It's debt. So what's sitting in these trust funds is a giant IOU. They have basically spent the money to the tune of $7.1 trillion. Wow. And that's what the public generally does not understand. So it's a problem, okay? So when they talk about the entitlements or the problem with the budget, well, that's really not fair, because they basically already spent our money. So it's like, put the damn money back, right? Now, Medicare Part A is in jeopardy, as we know, and that's going to be exhausted in 2036. Social Security will be exhausted in 2035. From a Social Security standpoint, what would happen is benefits would be paid out based on current inflows. And so Social Security recipients could pretty much be guaranteed you're going to get a 25% cut if that occurs. So again, that's an issue that has to be dealt with. So from a fiscal sustainability standpoint, what programs are going to be cut and how will that impact local governments? That's a big question mark. It's a big unknown, but it's something I just wanted you to be aware of. And it's just, I think it's something to kind of keep in the back of your minds. Now, let's look at states. So these are the 5 largest states in the country. They make up 35% of the U.S. GDP. Now, when we look at this comparison, first off, let's go over to Illinois, and you see that the most current financial statement available is June 30th, 2022. California is June 30th, 23, but New York, Texas, and Florida are pretty current. If you look at Florida compared to all of these other states, it wins in literally every single category. If you look at the unassigned fund balance, compared to total expenditures and transfers out, it's 50%. And if you compare that to these other states, and even Texas, and Texas is a strong state too, it's heads and shoulders above. As a matter of fact, Illinois is negative. Now, a couple of things about Illinois. If you look at their funded pension liability, it's only 40%. And when you dig into their financial statements, you notice a couple of things that they're doing. First off, they're not making the required contributions in their pension plans. They're using it for operations. Second, they're taking loans out for literally everything they buy from a capital standpoint, which basically frees up resources for operations too. But they're running a huge negative. So if I was living in Illinois and looking at these financial statements, I would be quietly packing my bags, selling my home, and moving away. There's no question about it. Florida, on the other hand, you can see in literally every category, they're strong. And so I'm happy to be in this state. I hope you are too. Now, this is the chart that probably took me the longest because, Commissioner Delary has been asking me for something like this for quite some time. And the problem is getting the information. But our governmental practice has grown so much that most of these counties we actually audit. So I had access to all of this information. There was a couple of counties that we don't audit, but get theirs done pretty quickly and posted on the Auditor General's website. So first off, and I think I've explained this before to you when you're looking at net position. The government standards require that you have this line item called investment in capital assets net of related debt. It's the only reporting model that has that. The nonprofit one does not have that. The commercial one does not have that. That's why I like to put the unrestricted and the total. So a county like Seminole that likes to do infrastructure projects because you have that, it's all funded, no problems there, is going to have possibly a negative unrestricted as a result of that calculation. So to me, the significant number to look at is the total, because that really is showing you kind of what your true financial position is. And if you look at that number compared to everybody else, I mean, there's really no issues there. Your business type activities are very strong by comparison. If you look at your unassigned general fund, which is the percentage of expenditures and transfers out compared to your total unassigned fund balance, you're 24%, which is not the highest, and definitely not, it's not the lowest, and it's definitely not the highest. You can see over Volusia County, there's a 70%. But there's probably a lot of different reasons for that. Total bonded debt is going to vary from entity to entity. If you look at Volusia, they don't spend the money on infrastructure the way, Seminole County does, but that's to the benefit, again, of Seminole County and meeting the needs of because you have a resource to be able to do that. You do not have these things. So the other numbers that you have to kind of peel out here deals with the millage rate. So the millage rate, you're second from the lowest, I think. And millage rates, as you know, there's two equations. There's the millage rate itself and there's the property values. So if you have an entity that has high property values, they may have a lower millage rate. If you have an entity that has a different mix of commercial versus residential, they too might have a higher or lower millage rate. So there's a lot of different factors put in there. But in looking at it, if you average everything, certainly on an average basis, your millage rate would be lower than everybody else. Any questions on this before I move on? I know you all look stunned. All right, so let's get into the financial highlights for this past year. Everything looks pretty good. When you look at your governmental activities, I'm not really seeing anything that is earth-shattering here. Your business activities, of course, have always been strong. Certainly, if you look at this at the top level, which is where you're looking at here, because think of your financial statements two tiers. There's the top level, which is compressing everything that you have, and then there's the fund level, which is basically showing unrestricted versus restricted. So most of your liquid assets, if you will, are in restricted funds, such as special revenue funds, capital projects funds, and debt service funds. So it's only your general fund that has any of the unrestricted amounts per se. And your business activities would have certainly some unrestricted amounts as well. So your business activities have always been strong. If we go in and look at your general fund, as I mentioned before, your unassigned fund balance, or your reserve, if you will, is 24%, which dropped a little bit from the previous year. And you had a positive change in fund balance, but there's other expenses and expenditures that basically brought that number down a little bit. From a budgetary standpoint, you're in the positive. If you look at the number down at the bottom corner, you're in the positive in terms of you didn't overspend your budget, which of course, we live in a state that you really can't do that. But there are other states that you actually can do that. I have done a analysis of different municipalities around the country too, and that's a big eye opener. But that's for another day. I put the two major proprietary funds here, which is solid waste and water and sewer. And again, you can see how healthy these funds are. Not all counties that I see have their liabilities fully funded on the solid waste side, and so that's very, very good, and it gives you the ability to expand if you can find the land and actually monitor that solid waste fund. So the last thing we need to do is we need your action, which is basically the approval of this, and once that happens, Jenny will be able to put this up on the Auditor General's website, and it'll be available for public view. I do want to thank Jenny and her staff for everything they do for us. It's we give her some big asks, and she goes through and puts a lot of information together for us, and we really appreciate it. And the constitutional officers and their staff, because the way this audit works, we have to audit each one of the constitutional officers, get their audits done first before we can come in and finish the board audit, and then everything has to be consolidated. So then Jenny and her staff basically consolidate all that, prepare the financial statements, and then we do, our final top-level reviews. But the audit went pretty well, and as you notice, we changed our name. from letters to an actual name, you know. So that went very well this year, too. We're all been very pleased with the transition over to Forbes Mazars. And then, as I think I've mentioned to all of you, this will be the last time I do this presentation. So it's on 12/31, I will be moving on, you know, onto something else. You know, I have no idea what that is, but I know there's going to be a lot of golf involved.
Mr. Chairman.
Any questions or inquiries from the board? Commissioner Herr.
First of all, a big shout out to Jenny, because you do this every year with little fanfare, and you are very, very much appreciated for the work that you do and the quality of the work that you do. I think your name was Alan. Thank you to you, because we know Dan did none of this over the weekend. And so he may have pulled some weird picture down off the internet, I'm not sure. But thank you to you for all you do, and we'll look forward to hearing from you next year. If you go back to the county analysis slide, which is, I think, your slide 10, the question that I have on that is, if you were to look at that and tell us what is our weakest point on that and what is our strongest point on that, what guidance would you give us?
Well, you have not, and I'm just going to be total honest, and I'm a taxpayer in Seminole County. I'm just going to tell you that, just, you know, full disclosure. You haven't raised your millage rate in forever, okay? And if you think about costs going up just from a COLA standpoint, cost of living standpoint, you know, you're probably a little behind, which I think is why you've seen your reserves kind of drop with the past couple of years. Remember, your reserves at one point in time were like 30%, okay? And now it's, you know, down to 24%. At some point in time, you got to be aware that if you drop down below that 20% mark, that starts to, you know, throw some red flags up there. And the primary reason for that is the flow of funds that come into your county. If you think about how tax revenue flows into the county, there's a huge delay from when you adopt the budget, when the tax bills get sent out, and how it starts to collect. So there's at least about a 3-month period where you got no revenue coming in, but yet you have operations that you have to fund. We also live in a hurricane-prone, you know, state, as you know, and we've had this experience. Now, fortunately, you've got some enterprise funds you've been able to kind of borrow from to fund some of the you know, the cost of the disasters kind of going forward, which is your strength, by the way. I think your proprietary funds is kind of a backstop for an emergency, and probably gives you a better position than some counties do. The infrastructure costs, I think, again, you were smart enough to get that funded, you know, where some counties are using general revenues to basically fund those. You know, so again, I think that's a strength. And I was glad to see, you know, as a taxpayer that got passed, because I know how you spend it, because I audit it, and I know the value that it brings to this county, and I think that's very important. But that kind of would be my biggest concern, is I just don't like seeing that reserve kind of going down a little bit.
So a follow-up to that, what is the sweet spot for reserves from your perspective? You said 20 throws up red flags. The math you just rolled out there was 25% if we got to fund 3 months, but that's fiscally responsible is 25%. What's the sweet spot?
I mean, I think fiscally responsible is 25%. I think anything above that is extra, and just kind of gives you a little cushion. Now, again, I don't think you have to worry about being over that as much as some of these other counties that don't have as strong a proprietary funds as you have. Okay, so that's why I'm saying in a catastrophic loss situation, your proprietary funds are really a backstop for you. But some of these other counties don't have that, I guarantee you. Like if you look at Osceola County, for example, you'll see that their proprietary or business type activities are negative. Well, why is it negative? It's because of the Osceola Parkway. They gave the assets over, to the Expressway Authority, but they had to maintain the debt because the debt's in their name, okay? And they couldn't relinquish the debt, so that's why it's this huge negative. So if you look at their enterprise fund there, it's not providing any backdrop value to them, if you will, like yours do.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Any inquiries? Commissioner Delory.
Thank you, Dan. First of all, congratulations on your future endeavors. Hopefully they'll be long and straight. And I'm sure you'll be spending a lot of time out in the fairways and greens, so congratulations on that. And this is a great chart. I know I've been asking for it for quite some time, but one thing that you didn't also talk about, and I understand that the millage rate is, you're talking about that we should have been talking about that in the past, but also looking at our debt services and also our reserves. But the thing that also helps us quite a bit with our bonding is our utility tax, because it's low, as well as our gas tax. The counties that you're talking about, they actually have higher utility rates, higher utility tax, and higher gas tax as well, which helps us. The citizens in this county, it's difficult sometimes to, everybody that, I shouldn't say, but there's a number of people that live here, and the percentage keeps on going up, that are retired, that are on fixed income. And it's hard to stay current with the cost of inflation and the high cost of everything that's going up. So these other counties that you're talking about, if you look at them, they do have a higher gas tax. They have a higher utility tax, which we don't.
Right.
And so that also helps us as well. So there's a lot of pros and cons in looking at this chart, but you need to dig deeper to get the full financial picture of those other counties as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a valid point, Commissioner, because they're using the gas tax dollars to deal with their infrastructure issues, where you have an isolated amount that is spread out, amongst not just the residents of the county, but the non-residents of the county.
Correct.
Which is positive.
Okay. Commissioner Constantine?
Thank you very much. Dan, we've been friends for a long time, and I just wanted to wish you the very best. You saved the best for last, by the way. This was, with the charts and the illustrations. Proud of you. I do, and what you've done in the community outside of this. You have been a leader in our community and in 501c3s, nonprofits, a number of different organizations, and I want to thank you for that. When we were talking about this, you did mention one of your great joys in life is golfing, and you did mention our golf course and just concerns that you had. Would you like to express those, please?
Yeah, I mean, golf courses make sense from a municipal standpoint or a county standpoint in this particular case, because what you're doing is you're preserving land. You have a place where you can also put, some of your treated water on.
Other values.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's going to lift property values around the golf course. So there's a lot of intrinsic value, to owning these things. And we see them, we have many, many clients that have golf courses. But a lot of times when you look at the operational side of them, because there's debt associated with them, there's depreciation on them, the bottom line, they're just not profitable, if you're looking at it as a business type activity. So that's been my only concern about it. So I certainly think it was a good purchase, from a
And we're talking about Wakaiva. We're just talking about Wakaiva.
Right.
We don't want to talk about the other golf courses because they're totally different.
Yeah, that's a whole different reason. As a matter of fact, I'm glad you bought the one in my community too, because my wife and I walk around that park, all we want, a lot now. So, but that's another reason. You're right. But they just don't make a bottom line profit per se. And I know you wanted to be transparent, and that's certainly your choice. But at some point in time, you might want to think about, collapsing it back into the general fund and putting it into the recreation department. But again, that's your decision.
Commissioner Lockhart.
I'll just say thank you. And I'm fortunate in that Dan and I served together as trustees on the Seminole State District Board of Trustees together. And so I was just with Dan yesterday. And I'll be with Dan again in a couple weeks. And so he may be retired from this, but he's got other responsibilities he needs to keep up with. And we're, you do a great job. And I appreciate how much you bring to the college. Your professional expertise and having your wisdom there is just invaluable. So thank you. Thank you for everything you've done here, and thank you for everything you continue to do.
I appreciate it. This has been one of my favorite clients to serve in my career, I will have to say. And it's fun serving not just a government, but a government that you live in that, you see all the things that I read about in the minutes and read about in the financial statements and everything else. I live it. So this I gave it a little extra, you might say. But it's been a pleasure. But thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a motion to approve and accept the county's annual comprehensive financial report for fiscal year ending September 30th, 2024, as presented here today.
Second.
Motion is second. Any further discussion? Commissioner Hurt.
Just for follow-up with regard to when we talk through the budgeting process, we need to really think through that, collapse the golf course into the general fund. I will go on record as saying I am not a fan of doing that. I like the transparency that we've provided. That was a business decision that could be asked to be made again at some point in the future, and we need a very clear accounting of what this stuff cost us. I get that there's intrinsic value and all of that good stuff, but when we collapse it, it becomes very difficult for us to find that. It's a research mission for staff that I don't want to put out there. So for later consideration.
Well, Dan, thank you very much. I sincerely appreciate the years that you've given to the county and your diligence. This, I would agree, is probably one of the better reports, or the best reports. You left the best for last, as you stated. I would agree, so bravo to you. And of course, I will miss the debates that you and I often have about reserves from a business perspective. And I probably will still have that debate with your predecessor. So I look forward to that, as well as my fellow commissioners who chastise me often about reserves when we get into that discussion. And reserves are taxpayers' dollars.
But you can still have that debate.
I understand.
I am a taxpayer.
Right,
Resident
absolutely.
Here,
It's my core belief is when those tragedies and unfortunate circumstances, when the economy makes a downturn, what is the first thing that should happen? Retraction, which means you scale back what you're doing, you scale back your spending. That begins to help bolster your reserves as you move forward, and then make the turn and then come out of that. So, but I sincerely wish you the best. I suspect you will be playing golf for a great deal longer than you suspect, and hopefully you do some traveling with your wife.
Yeah, absolutely.
Make her happy. So, very good. I will call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Like sign. Seeing none? Carries unanimous. Thanks again, Dan. We appreciate your service. All right, next up we have item number 5. This will be the State Road 417 Sanford Airport Connector PD&E study update. Mr. John Slott is not here today, so we will move to Will Hawthorne.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Very happy to be here on behalf of Central Florida Expressway Authority. Thank you for the opportunity to provide an update on the project development and environment study we have underway on State Route 417 Sanford Airport Connector. With me today are our Executive Director, Michelle Mikish, and our Senior Director of External Affairs, Raquel Asa. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, so in 2003, we completed the concept feasibility and mobility study to evaluate a new direct expressway extension between 417 and the Orlando Sanford International Airport. During that study, there were 4 corridors that were developed and evaluated, and each of those were deemed as being feasible. The PD&E study we have now started in May of last year. The project team has been hard at work refining and evaluating those 4 alternatives that were recommended from the CF&M team, as well as a 5th alternative, which is the elevated viaduct or bridge roadway through the median of East Lake Mary Boulevard. It's important to note that several studies have been conducted for this connection in this corridor, but none of those prior studies actually determined the expressways to be feasible. Most recently, the Turnpike is currently in the design phase for the widening of State Route 417 from 4 to 8 lanes between 434 and Airport Boulevard. Our State Route 417 Airport Connector CF&M study was approved again in 2023, with our board providing authorization to move on to the next step, which is the PD&E phase where we're at today. This expressway connection is being proposed to help address the expansion plans at the Orlando Sanford International Airport, the projected increase in the traffic along East Lake Mary Boulevard, the anticipated population growth in Seminole County and in the study area. Because of the ongoing development and the growth in the area, East Lake Mary Boulevard, as you know, is quickly approaching capacity. And there are long delays experienced during peak periods at the interchange with 417 and the other intersections as you approach Red Cleveland. The purpose and need of this project has been further refined during this study for the design year or horizon year of 2050. And the project is anticipated to enhance regional connectivity, mobility, and address anticipated future traffic needs, support socioeconomic growth, plan development, as well as improvements to our modal connectivity. Shown here are the 5 alternatives we started off with when we began this PDN study just over a year ago. Alternative 1 is in pink and is the longest alignment. It has the greatest direct residential and non-residential impacts and travels from 417 south of the Lake Jessup Toll Plaza to the east and north to East Lake Murray Boulevard, east of Sipes Avenue, and then connects at Red Cleveland, south of the airport. Alternative 2, shown in green, is the shortest alignment and has the lowest potential environmental impacts, with the exception being 4 of the 4 new alignments, this being in the middle of the study. Alternative 2 travels from State Route 417 north of the Lake Jessup Toll Plaza, and then again connects at least East Lake Murray Boulevard at Red Cleveland Boulevard. Alternatives 3A and 3D, in orange and blue respectively, attempt to balance the direct impacts to the existing and planned residential developments, as well as the environmentally sensitive land. They both begin at 417 south of the Lake Jessup Toll Plaza and head north to East Lake Murray Boulevard, again connecting at the intersection with Red Cleveland Boulevard. Now, alternative 3A is located west of 3D and it had the potential to impact a number of residences north of Pine Way. 3D, on the other hand, is east of 3A. This avoids those residential impacts, but does have a greater impact to the stormwater south of Pine Way. Lastly, alternative 4, shown in teal, is the viaduct or raised bridge roadway that would begin at 417 in the area of the existing interchange with County Road 427 and Lake Mary Boulevard. It then runs east down the median of East Lake Mary Boulevard to Red Cleveland Boulevard. At the heart of any PD&E study is the traffic that it not only will generate, but relieve to the other network in the transportation area. Our analysis, again, was done looking at a horizon year of 2050 on East Lake Murray Boulevard and the different airport alignment, connector alignment alternatives. By the year 2050, East Lake Murray Boulevard is expected to carry 36,700 cars per day. The alignment with the most benefit to East Lake Murray Boulevard are alignment 2, 3A, and 3D, so the alignments that were in the middle of the study area. These would have a 40% reduction in traffic on East Lake Mary Boulevard in that stretch between 417 and Red Cleveland. It would take it from 36,700 down to 19,800 vehicles per day. The alignment with the least benefit to Lake Mary Boulevard is alignment 4, which again is the viaduct option. And that only reduces traffic by about 21%, and it carries around 8,900 cars per day. So at this point in the study, we've eliminated 4 of the 5 original alternatives we started the PD&E with. The primary factors of those being dropped were driven by the environmental and social impacts, the traffic benefits to East Lake Mary Boulevard, as well as project costs. Now, as we focused in on this area of alignment 2 in green, we looked to see if there was an opportunity to smooth out the curbs a little bit, and that is where alignment 2A was born. I will note that alignment 2A, where it connects in, does stay north of the Lake Jessup Conservation Area that is owned by South St. John's Water Management District. This change was determined to be significant enough that we would have to go back out to the public to let them weigh in on this. So that's exactly what we did. We held a refined alternatives public meeting on April 2nd of 2025 to get their input before we made a decision on the preferred alternative. Now, before I move on from this slide, I do want to take a moment. We've had several meetings with county staff discussing some possible additions to what we have proposed and/or some changes. The first were the ramps to and from the north, go north on 417 or to come from the north on 417. Now, at this point, we don't have those in the study, but it's important to note that both of these alternatives do not preclude a future interchange if that were to be the desire. So it's something that, as this PD&E closes out, we could look at that in the future with Turnpike's approval. Now, the main reasons we didn't include those is financial viability. This project has to be a financially feasible project from a toll perspective for it to move forward. Adding these ramps, we're looking at $70 to $100 million. So the viability factor goes down drastically if these were to be added at this stage. The others, project schedule, we wouldn't be able to hold the project schedule as it is today. We're looking to close this out in August. You could automatically add in probably another year, maybe a year and a half to the schedule. Third would be the traffic demand. It is somewhat of a backwards movement, and we just didn't have the data there to justify these. Now, all that being said, again, these ramps are not precluded in the future. And we do recognize that behaviors change, demands may change if this moves forward. So we've committed to looking at that in the future if this project does come to fruition. This is a rendering of what the connector would look like. The same meetings we had with staff, they did mention taking from 2 lanes to 4 lanes. Again, for the same reasons, we have to deal with project schedule, deal with the financial viability. That's really the big one. And just trying to get this project, across the PD&E finish line is what our target is right now. We would have 2 15-foot lanes in each direction. Those would have 4-foot paved shoulders, as well as landscapes areas on each side for this corridor. It's a bridge section, very typical to what you'd see on 417 today over Lake Mary Boulevard, even on our system. And then as we went to the public, we had a lot of questions about would they be able to use this coming from Lake Mary Boulevard. There's kind of a misconception that it goes directly into the airport and there's no relief to Lake Mary. That's totally not the case. This is a main reliever for Lake Mary Boulevard, as you've already seen, and you will have full access there. The Red Cleveland access for the airport will be maintained, so we'll kind of get the best of all the worlds, both worlds. You'll have the access that's there today, plus a possible future connection with 417. Now, the comparison between alignments 2 and 2A are very similar. Alignment 2A does have less wetland impacts and less mitigation costs, but it does have higher costs for utility relocations as well as right-of-way costs. Alignment 2A is better from a roadway geometry perspective. It does have fewer curves. Your sight distance is improved. And it would ultimately be a little safer than Alignment 2 because you don't have the big sweeping curves back and forth. Overall, Alignment 2A is estimated to cost about $7 million more than 2, which we've carried forward at this point in the study. So at the Refined Alternatives public meeting, we did host that in April 2nd of this year. We had about a little over 100 people attend in person, a little under 100 in virtual attendees. And then we actually put out a survey for the study, similar to what we did in Osceola County, and that was extremely successful. We had over 400 respondents on that. It was a geofence survey, so if you came into the study area, drove through it, you lived in it, it was kind of promoted. So it was very successful. We got a lot of feedback on that. We'll probably look forward to doing that on any future PD&E study. Now, as with any PD&E, we do engage with agencies far and wide. We've met with county staff, like I said. We do have a project advisory group which consists of municipalities, cities. They sit on the board and on that group and kind of give their input, what projects they have underway. We also have an environmental advisory group those are members like St. John's, Audubon Society, Sierra Club, things like that. And then we have our Environmental Stewardship Committee that is assigned and appointed by our board members at the Central Florida Expressway Authority. These are groups that we consult with multiple times throughout the schedule of the study and make sure that we're taking all different perspectives into account as we try to land on a preferred alternative. Before I close out, we'll talk about the schedule. Like I said, we did finish up with our Refined Alternatives public meeting. We are working towards a public hearing that is tentatively scheduled in July of this year with a goal of going before our board in August of 2025. That concludes our presentation and update, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hawthorne. We'll start at the far end with Commissioner Lockhart and work our way across.
Curious about the alternatives that staff requested that you investigate. Can you expand on those a little bit more and tell us what the impetus from that was, from your perspective? This is the first time hearing that we asked for additional things to be looked at.
So let me go back a couple slides. The first one were ramps to and from the north on 417. So right now, this would really is taking traffic, it's to and from the south. Mm-hmm. That's where the demand is that we see in our traffic studies right now. Mm-hmm. So they asked that we look at that. We did look at it.
But where is from the north? Like, can you be a little more specific? Because there's a lot of north.
If you were coming from I-4, for example, you would be able to take ramps from I-4, or from, if you're heading south on 417, mm-hmm. so down on this map, you could then go back to the east and have that direct connection into the airport. So right now, you'd be coming over the bridge from Lake Jessup, going east to get into the airport, right, or to Lake Mary Boulevard. In the reverse movement, you would take a left onto this connector, and then you would only be able to go south on 417. You wouldn't be able to go north. So to the north and from the north.
They weren't asking for a realignment that would connect, like, where 1792 is, or where Reinhardt Road, like, I'm just trying to figure out.
No, not a realignment. Just,
not a realignment.
We'll call it
Okay.
a full interchange.
Got
So
it.
this is a half interchange that only gets you to areas.
Understood. Okay, I was
In the
thinking
south.
there was some
Yeah, no,
other
no.
place from the north
No,
that they were
Study area
wanting
did
to
not
connect,
change.
and I'm like, what is that? I don't understand.
Through Lock
No,
Harbor.
great question, no.
Yeah, right, that'd be fabulous, let's do that. Thank you.
Commissioner Constantine.
Thank you. Good job, Will, explaining it. And also, I just have to say to the Expressway Authority, from the point of us first starting to talk about this to the point that you've gotten here, in my situation, I think it's been rather quick compared to some of the other programs I've seen. So in that case, I want to congratulate you all as you move forward. The 2A, first, when you were looking at the original, the 2, great. 2A now looks like that's obviously the alignment that you're looking at. But the thing I was interested in is you said you had 400 surveys. What did those surveys say? I don't see that in the presentation.
So those surveys, they said a lot. I'd say 50% of those that were submitted responses recognize a need for a reliever to East Lake Mary. Some said I think it was 40% said they were experienced 10 minutes delays on Lake Mary, and then there was another, I think 23% that were saying they were 20+ minutes on Lake Mary Boulevard. So the public does see a need for something like this, or at least half of the survey did. The alignment 2 has been out there for some time. I mean, the concept study had it. That was done. That was wrapped up in '23. The PD&E has had alignment 2 for the entire time we've been doing the study. So it's been out there for several years. 2A is relatively new. So there was a little bit more favored toward alignment 2. We got to look at more than just the surveys, though. You got to look at the environmental impacts and residential impacts as well. We do have less wetland impacts with alignment 2A. That and the drivability of this is really where that was born. We do have a slight increase in residential impacts that are possible, but it's something we had to look at and we had to take to the public to get input on. So.
Will those results be available?
Absolutely.
Okay.
They're published in the PD&E study.
Okay. I'd love to see those if you can
Okay.
get them. Also, when you say that, was there any change in the numbers of the 19,800 the amount of use of that? There was, I think, trips, 19,800. Is that the correct number for 2? So did you ever is 2A different, or is it basically saying the same?
So the traffic generation for 2A, 3A, which is to the east, is kind of grayed out, and then 3D were all the same. It's almost the same distance. Those 4 had the biggest relief to East Lake Mary Boulevard.
So now the situation is less impact on the environment, less impact on the residents. This is what we're looking at, the balance there. The greatest, trips generated. I think you said that 2A is about 7 million more.
It is.
I hate to say this, but in terms of your projects, that's a rounding mistake. In some cases, that's not a lot of money compared to the 2. I know it's a lot of money to us, to everyone, but in the case of, the long term of the use of these projects, that is not, you even said it's a relatively different, a small difference.
It's not enough to sway to 2A or 2. I will say the viaduct was nearly 3 times the cost for these other alternatives. So that's where project cost becomes a big factor. Not only cost, but that one had half the relief of traffic that on East Lake Mary that these others did. So 2 big factors there that we just couldn't carry that one forward.
Though it looked great. Yeah. So what's the next step?
So the next steps is we got to get to our public hearing and tentatively set for July. That's we have a court reporter. We get all the public comments on record again. We'll take that data. We'll go back to our board, which Commissioner Hurst sits on, as you know, and we'll present the findings of the study. They have a number of different options. They can accept it. The financial viability is something that we're literally in the throes of right now. Our consultants are working on it as we speak. That conversation, we'll start to have that with, if this doesn't quite rise to the bar of being where we as staff need to be to recommend it to the board to move forward, we'll have to have partnership conversations, which I know that the county has possible areas that they could work with us on that. As far as future funding, we purposely don't fund these for design and construction because that could be construed as, biasing the study that, well, it's a foregone conclusion, you're going to do it anyway. What you don't see here is the no build. That's the third alternative that is still on the table. No build is carried all the way through to the end. So you've got a no build alternative 2 and 2A. So those are the things that, we'll take a no build and a preferred alternative to our public hearing in July.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Delory.
Thank you, Will. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So there's two neighborhoods you're trying to sneak this thing through, slide it through. There's an existing one, there's one that's under construction, at least what you see on Google Map. Talk to me about those two neighborhoods, please.
So we have heard, we had an alignment so 3A was hitting us a good part of, I think it's Concord. That's the neighborhood on the west side. That had a number of, much higher residential impacts than the others. So that was obviously eliminated early on in the alternatives workshop process.
Okay.
3D is closer to the other side neighborhoods. 2A and 2 are common corridor. They kind of split the middle between those two neighborhoods there. Alignment 1, again, that goes out to the east. It is much longer than the others. It doesn't have the relief to East Lake Mary Boulevard that these 2A and 2 have. So it's again.
So just focus on 2A and 2 on those
sorry?
two. Just focus on 2 and 2A on those two neighborhoods.
Yeah, these go right between, they kind of split the difference between those two neighborhoods and that stormwater management area.
So what will happen to those two neighborhoods? Are we taking homes, or are they going to stay?
No, right now, we don't have any homes to be taken
Okay.
in those neighborhoods. That was.
That's why I'm asking the question.
Okay. Well, no homes in those neighborhoods.
So there's no condemnation or buying of people's homes?
Not for 2 or 2A, not in those two neighborhoods. No, we do have south, and in the southern part of the alignment.
I understand that, but with those two existing neighborhoods, they're pretty significant. That's why I'm asking the question.
That is correct. And those two HOAs, we would not be condemning anyone's personal homes. We would have HOA property, but not their personal homes.
Got it. On the proposed connecting typical section, you're showing, it's the next slide over. Eventually, when the demand is needed, can you put 4 lanes on that?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, we've laid that out. These are 15-foot lanes, so those would convert into 2 12-foot lanes with a shoulder. This would be similar to what we did with 417 and 429. When we built those, we laid those out to be widened to the middle. We're now doing that. I would point out the right-of-way, if this moves forward, the right-of-way we require, we would pretty much fit inside that right-of-way. So there wouldn't be new right-of-way, would be cleared from a PD&E study perspective. It's a pretty straightforward process when that is needed in the future.
Okay, can you talk to me about what's happening in Farmington, about how that's going to affect this project coming through Seminole County?
Farmington?
Volusia County, there's 23,000 homes already been approved on 415.
It's outside of our study area. I mean,
Okay.
that's been looked at by other agencies. If you're talking about a connection that goes further north, is that what you're?
Well, no, those homes are going to be on 415, which is just north of Seminole County.
Right.
Okay, so they're coming here, and so I'm curious, have you put those numbers in your feasibility?
Yes, those are in the traffic study. So the one key thing to keep in mind, when and if this needs to be 4-lane, this connector, improvements would need to be occurring on East Lake Mary Boulevard east of Red Cleveland. So you essentially would have 4 lanes from this connector, 4 lanes from East Lake Mary today feeding into, so you'd have 8 lanes feeding into 4. So there would need to be improvements to get up into.
Well, I understand that, but I'm talking about with this piece here, because those homes have already been approved to a certain extent. And I don't know the exact time that they're going to be starting construction, but there's going to be a lot more traffic on 415 coming south into
Yes.
Seminole County. And I want to make sure that that's in your model.
Yes, that's part of the regional planning model that we get from D5, that we take and we kind of adjust for our needs. But yes, that is accounted for.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Herr.
I'll pick up where that leaves off. I think that's the reason for the request for it to come in from the north. I'm guessing that there's interest in that, but that, we have an immediate demand. That is a future demand that would need to be addressed, so I'll just leave it at that. I think somebody asked about next steps, and I think the biggest part of the next step for us is in the budgeting process with regard to determining what partnership looks like and costs. I think that we have a responsibility to be all speaking, now that we've seen this, with regard to this Lake Mary Boulevard viaduct. It is not an option. And there is a significant amount of groundswell out there that it would be less expensive because there's no right-of-way, but you're building a road on top of over a road. It is
It's always expensive.
very, very much more expensive, and it does not relieve the traffic to the same degree. So it loses on both sides of that. And I think we need to be messaging that out there as we're getting asked, because I know we're all getting these phone calls. I do want to make sure that for the record, if you put up the slide that shows 2 and 2A, the purple and the green line, that what we were referencing in terms of no homes being taken is where the green and the purple converge and it's purple only and it's threading the needle there. Down as you get closer to the 417, there are plots of land and there is acquisition, and whatever has to happen there has to happen there. So we made a statement that was in reference to former sentences that said there would be no homes taken, but it's no homes taken, and you corrected it and said in those two neighborhoods.
Correct.
I just want to make sure we are
Correct.
clear about that on this dais. I do think Commissioner Constantine is correct. The amount of work that you've done on this in the short amount of time that we've asked you to push this through has been really remarkable. And I think that's important because the longer we wait to do this, the more expensive it becomes, and we need to know whether it's economically viable now. And so we appreciate that. That's not a foregone conclusion as to where it goes, but the timing of doing it was very important, so I very much appreciate that. And that's all I have.
Anyone else?
Can I just, to expand upon that also, the faster we do this, the less additional concerns of homes
Yep.
and alignments are going to happen.
Yes.
I've seen that time and time again where we know where a road's going, but then folks come in to start building roads, and it increases the cost to everybody, mostly the taxpayers.
Absolutely.
So the faster we do it, so when you said, so there will be homes impacted on, I will call it the southern side.
Yes.
Until it converges into the single purple line.
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. So one more bit of information on the viaduct. I know that's been a lot of the popular option. That's not expandable to 4 lanes. So that's
Great point.
almost $600 million for just 1 lane in each direction. And it's not a shorter trip. So you got to look at, the end of the bridge, Lake Jessup. It's still the same distance that you would be traveling, hence the reason why the traffic was not, there to relieve. It wasn't quite as popular of an option.
Okay,
They're talking to-
Commissioner Delory, then Commissioner Constantine.
Well, I got a question. So between 2A and 2, at a later date, when you put the northern ramps in, there's enough separation to the existing exit and the new ramps, correct?
It does. It does. We
So
looked
we're
at
not
that.
going to fall into that?
No, we looked at that. 2A works a lot better than 2. I mean, you do need some separation between
I
exits and
understand.
interchanges.
That's why I'm
but
asking the
yes.
question.
Yes, sir.
Commissioner Constantine.
And since Will is a wealth of information, I'm asking this question because it's not directly related to this, but we talked about the viaduct. We are looking at a viaduct around the Maitland Avenue in the Altamont Springs and the Seminole County area there for Maitland Boulevard, the expansion, extension, whatever you want to call it, of Maitland Boulevard. How is that going since you're here? I wanted to.
It's progressing. We are in design. I think we're approaching 60% plans. That is a very, that's not a cheap project.
No.
But it is one of the projects that, if you look at a big map, there are very few east-west connectors, and that is we all know, it's a huge pinch point. I mean, it backs up every day, peak hour. So it's something that we're trying to work as diligently as we can, and there's a lot of utilities out there, as you know. So we almost have 2 sets of plans. You got a utility sets of plans and then the bridge set, which is no small feat. But it is well underway. It's funded for construction. It's just a matter of getting the plans done at this point.
You have Orange County on one side and Seminole County on the other.
That is correct.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you very much. We appreciate you being here for your presentation today and taking our questions.
Thank
Keep
you.
up the good work, and we'll look for the next update.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, could you make one more comment, if I may, Mr. Chairman? I think since this is a big, not just local, but potential in the future regional need, besides the expressway, we should also be talking to, because we're talking about big dollars here at some point, the Turnpike as well as DOT. So we should be talking to all entities to make sure that we're exhausting all future dollars coming into this project.
Absolutely. I mean, we had a meeting with Turnpike on Friday, and we're talking to the airport. I think we'll be presenting to the airport in the very near future. There should be no stone left unturned.
I understand. That's why I'm bringing it up, because
Yes, sir.
DOT, Turnpike, yourself, airport, everyone.
All of them. Yes, sir.
On that note, can you go back to the very first slide?
This one?
The one with all the partners and stakeholders,
Oh.
somewhere in there.
In the back.
Sorry.
There you go. So all of these entities are aware, involved, engaged, collaborated. Is that a fair assessment?
Multiple times.
Great.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you all again very much for being here. We sincerely appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, folks, we're going to move to our consent agenda. If there's anyone here that desires to speak on the consent agenda, please fill out one of the forms in the lobby. Bring those up and hand them to Ms. Dominique, the clerk, here with her hand raised. I will now go to the county attorney, Ms. Kate Latour, for the rules of public participation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Florida law provides the members of the public shall be given a reasonable opportunity to be heard on propositions before the Board of County Commissioners, except when the board is acting on emergency or ministerial matters or conducting a meeting exempt from the requirements of the Sunshine Law. Individuals shall be permitted 3 minutes each for public comment or 6 minutes when the individual is an official representative of a formal association or group. The chairman may modify the maximum time for public comment at his sole discretion when appropriate. Public comments on quasi-judicial or other public hearing items will occur during the board's consideration of those items this afternoon. Public comments on pending procurement matters or on non-agenda items shall not be permitted at this time. Members of the public desiring to make public comment must fill out a speaker form and present the form to staff. Forms are available in the lobby. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Latour. Mr. County Manager, is there any updates on the consent agenda?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. Just one item I would like to pull. It's item number 11, and I'll be bringing that back to the board.
Number 11?
And that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. Any commissioner have an item they'd like to pull? Commissioner Lockhart?
I'd like to pull 8.
Number 8 for Commissioner Lockhart. Anyone else? Seeing none, then I will go to public participation. Is there anyone here to speak on any of the consent agenda items?
No, sir.
Seeing none, we'll close public input.
Mr. Chairman, I will move the approval of the constitutional officer's consent agenda number 6 and the county manager's consent agenda 7 through 21, with the exception of the administratively pulled 11 and the commission pulled 8.
Second.
Motion and second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed, like sign. Seeing none, carries unanimously. We will go to Commissioner Lockhart, item number 8.
The reason that I pulled this is that there is a provision in our interlocal governance agreement for the funding of Sunrail that allows any of the partners to make a proposed amendment during the budgetary process. And so what I would like to do is, instead of us adopting this tentative budget, that we make a proposed amendment. And I touched on this a little bit at our last meeting about the lack of timing coordination with DOT's budget and our budget. Sorry, it's a weed whacker.
Landscape, yeah.
What is that noise? Okay. So so my proposed amendment would be that that FDOT provide a revised tentative budget after their fiscal year concludes, so that we can capture any remaining fund balance. It could be a carry forward, which would then leave all of the funding partners in a neutral position moving forward into this next budget year. So that is my proposal, and if anyone has additional questions or technical, I asked Christian Swenson if he would be available on deck for anything that may come up.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Constantine.
I concur with Commissioner Lockhart. I was going to also suggest that we pull this because in the discussion, not only with staff, but in Commissioner Lockhart's reports before, we're talking about a $2 million contingency, which we've never had before, a $250,000 fee on insurance, and we really don't know right now what it is. So to put that budget into perspective and lock it in concrete at this moment, I think is incorrect. So I would, if that's a motion, I'll second the motion.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? Commissioner Herr.
I just need clarification. So are we approving the budget with your amendment stating that, say it again?
Okay.
Because
I
the
think
two
the
of
county
you didn't
manager
say the
wants
same
to.
thing.
I see him grabbing his microphone, so I'll let him answer the question, and I'll follow up.
So two things, that we will actually, we'll put a placeholder in the budget just for our planning purposes, working with Commissioner Lockhart, just for, as we go through our budget work sessions. But yeah, so you would not be taking action on a budget for the CFCRC, for Sunrail, basically. Commissioner Lockhart at the next board meeting would ask for an amendment that we would bring a budget back probably in July when the state closes their books, and then we would know the exact amount of their fund balance rollover. So more than likely, it will be less than what they had given us as an estimate. So we would not be recommending a budget to the board.
Okay, and so the follow-up to that is, and then at that point, if it will just come back at a later date with whatever the numbers are based on either the closeout or the notion that we can't wait for that because of X, Y, or Z.
Right.
So it may indeed come back before then.
Correct.
Understood.
Yes.
I think the timeline that, the needle that we're threading on the timeline is that we're required, the CFCRC is required to adopt a tentative budget by a certain date, but then there is sort of, I don't know if I want to call it a cooling off period, or a time where the local government funding partners have the ability to review, make suggestions, adopt, move, whatever. And so we're in that window of opportunity to make suggestions.
I fully understand it and will support it, so anyone else? All right, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed, like sign? Carries unanimously. Thank you. All right, next item up is going to be item 22. This is going to be our microtransit services, and we're going to take a quick 5 to 10 minute break because they've got to come up and get set up and bring computers and plug in. So if everybody wants to take a quick, say 10 minutes, let's be back in 10 minutes. Okay, we're back on. This is item number 22, options for microtransit services. This will be presented by Assistant County Manager, Mr. Christian Swenson, and Mr. Tim Jackson, Management and Budget Director. I would ask the commission, if you're looking at your slides, there is a slide that says Board Input and Policy Direction. If we can wait until that point to ask any questions we may have, would be very helpful to our staff, so thank you. All right, gentlemen.
Thank you, Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners. Christian Swenson, Assistant County Manager.
I'm Timothy Jex, the Director of the Office of Management and Budget.
Tim, you'll probably have to pull your mic a little closer, or up, there you go. Thank you.
Before we get started, just for purposes of people that may be viewing today that may not recall what microtransit was from our previous discussion, I just want to give a very, very high overview of what microtransit is. It's a demand public transportation system. It is very similar to kind of an Uber or a Lyft, but a shared service. It is a door-to-door pickup. It doesn't have to be. We're talking about door-to-door today. And then also you reserve an order through either an app or a call center, as opposed to traditional public transportation where you go to shelters and go to a fixed route and wait for a bus to come. So I just wanted to kind of point that out just for high level. And then additionally, you're going to hear me talking a lot. I have a tendency to kind of guess on. So I don't want anyone to think that this is the Christian show. There's a lot of people behind me that have helped with this, and with that, if I may, I just want to mention a couple of them. Tim, he's worked with me obviously extensively. I've taken him a lot of evenings away from his wife. Also have had a purchasing staff that has reacted to a procurement we put out that was very wide, very broad-based, and that they did a fabulous job. Dr. Paul Tweed in our facilities group, we actually had him riding Lynx buses for a week and taking a bunch of things. And then John Slott, who would be at the table with us today, but is having a medical procedure, and he was part of the selection committee and has a public transportation background. So with all that said, let me just kind of jump into things. As you see on the screen, here's our agenda. We're basically going to go through a purpose, talk about where we've been, talk about what meetings we had with stakeholders, review the RFP, and then, as Commissioner Zembauer mentioned, we're going to solicit input from the board, and we'll reach a series of questions as a result of that. Once that finishes up, we'll talk about next steps, and then ultimately go to a recommendation. So getting started on the purpose of this whole presentation is to solicit input from the board, to get that guidance, to go back to the vendors that provided proposals for our RFP, and then come back to the board ultimately with a recommendation and a ranking. So now going on to the progress. At last year's budget workshop in June, the board asked us to look at ways to reduce Lynx costs. The costs had gotten quite expensive. There was a year-over-year cost increase, and things were just kind of getting a bit unbearable for us. So we were directed to go try to bring things back and try to come up with some other ideas. So as a result of that, we spent June through October meeting with Lynx staff, and ultimately that resulted in a presentation to the board in November of last year where we presented some Lynx changes, some different ideas, some of which were microtransit, and then also presented an alternative concept with the city of Arlington and how they do microtransit with a wide open zone and things like that. So from that meeting, the board provided us direction to go out and solicit an RFP and try to find out what's in the marketplace. The board wanted it very wide open, not for staff to create false parameters, but to let the marketplace speak to what's out there. And then also, when we talked to budget, the same kind of thing was there. Budget wasn't set. It was said, have folks provide it. Let's see what it's out there. Let's see what it costs. So this is what's happened there. That RFP was brought back, the scope of services, to the board for approval in December of last year. Solicitation went out on the street, and then it closed at the beginning of February. So in addition to when the RFP was brought together and the board was talking about those things, we were also directed to meet with community partners and stakeholders and just try to get input as to what our service might look like, what their needs are. So as a result of that, we've had a series of meetings with potential partners and stakeholders. We met with Seminole County Public Schools, Seminole State College, the three hospitals in the county. We also met with the Sanford Airport Authority. We met with the county's Department of Community Services to capture the different social service needs that may be out there kind of in one group. And then we also met with all 7 cities. So now the next few slides I'll go through the feedback we got from each one of these partnership stakeholder group. So the first one, Seminole County Public Schools. The school system said this type of thing would be very good for their dual enrollment students. Currently, they have students at school that want to take dual enrollment classes at Seminole State College, but the classes may fall during the middle of the day and they can't get there. There's not transportation. So they thought this filled the void for that. They also educated us on something called Project Search. This is a program for folks with disabilities that helps them get into the workplace and then also trains them on how to get around using public transportation, things like that. They felt this program too would benefit from such a service. Currently, they're using paratransit, and there are some hiccups with that. And then, of course, students that are involved with after-school activities where the bus service may have already gone for the day and they have duties to handle afterwards with different activities. So they provided preferences to us because of the types of things they were looking at and the school system being a county-wide service. They said, hey, we would like this to be a county-wide service with perhaps drop-off limitations for the students as to where they can be dropped off so they're not going to a store or something like that. They also suggested that the transportation serve users that are 15 years old and older, that there be background checks provided to the drivers, which that's something that was standard in all the proposals we received. And then they asked that there not be joint ride sharing for the minors. The way this works, as I mentioned, with, it's similar to Uber, but you pick up people along the way and go from that. So there is kind of a shared ride, and obviously with the minors, there was some concerns about that. The next group we met with, Seminole State College, and one thing for me just to say, I'm going to run through these. They were not the meetings in any order. I don't want to make sure that anyone is being misled that they were in this kind of chronological order. But so the next group I'm going to talk about is Seminole State College. They felt it was helpful for their general students, and they also felt it was especially helpful for internship students to be able to get to and from employers. And then healthcare students, they oftentimes will have clinical rotations as part of their coursework where they go to a bunch of different healthcare facilities to do their coursework and get their experience. They thought it was helpful for that. They thought their preferences would be that it needed to serve as a connection between all their campuses. That the operating hours of the service we provide match class schedules. They currently have a free transportation for students program that they pay to links. They would like this program to have the same, and there was a willingness to transfer that funding perhaps to this program if it met the need. The next group we met with were the 3 hospital systems. They felt this was especially helpful for their patients as well as their employees. They saw a need that potentially could be beneficial for free transportation to and from urgent care centers. Also, this could serve as a employee benefit. They also thought this was a great advertising partnership potential for them, and this would serve as potentially a revenue offset for us. And apparently they provide transportation or contract with transportation for some of their patients, and they have a kind of a cadre of groups that they do this, and people of all different levels of people with no mobility issues to people with mobility issues go to different services. They thought obviously this could provide a potential avenue for them with regard to some of those folks, so that they like that as well. The next group we'll speak about is the Sanford Airport Authority. They thought this was beneficial to not only their airport customers, but their airport employees. They were especially interested in a connectivity to Sunrail, and also not only a connectivity to Sunrail, but to have enhanced services during their peak flight times with regard to Sunrail. And they too were interested in advertising partnerships with us. Then, as I previously mentioned, we met with the county's Department of Community Services. They mentioned to us that they thought this would be beneficial to low-income residents, the homeless population that we have in the county, people with disabilities, as well as seniors. It was brought to our attention that the Committee on Aging identified senior transportation as one of their key priorities. They felt that this transit service should allow access to in a county-wide services that are limited. So there are certain services around the county that may only happen once or twice, or one or two locations. And as a result of that, a county-wide services would help make sure those services are available to all. They thought it would be helpful to have a tiered reduced fare structure, and in fact, potentially fully subsidize certain users or certain drop-off locations. So They also advised us of community organization and insurance partnerships that were potentially beneficial. Apparently, insurance companies cover transportation to certain appointments, and they thought we should talk to them, so that's something that we'll pick up in the future. We also met with the 7 cities within the county. Obviously, the potential users from that group are the city residents. The feedback we got from the cities was they were looking for a more efficient and improved alternative to the current fixed route services that we have. They were looking for something that would reduce pickup times as well as travel times for the people using it. There was an interest in connection to the Sanford Airport. There was also a feeling that commuter opportunities would benefit from this, and this would be a good thing, and that this could serve as an improved feeders to local commerce centers. In fact, the cities actually applauded the county for taking on, we heard this a couple times, taking on such a large efficiency improvement. They were very impressed with that. And they also provided some initial support for the additional 5-cent gas tax toward mass transit. After we met with the stakeholders, we also utilized a review of links as part of this process. And we met with links. We met with the links planning folks. We looked at our routes. We tried to understand riderships. We also, separately from those meetings, we went through all the boarding and alighting data that links has online. And we went kind of stop by stop on a number of routes to see who's getting on where, who's getting off where, to try to better understand it. As mentioned, we conducted a county staff field survey. We actually put Mr. Tweed on the bus. We sent him around there. He took the boarding and alighting data and looked to see, is it the same, is it different, and things like that. He provided us some good information. We obviously appreciate his time on there. We also, Links provided us some proposed route changes. We reviewed them. That was part of our initial meeting, and we looked at that. We also met with Orange County because, we looked at Route 1, which is a route that comes up to Altamont and terminates at the mall and, in the hospital there, and kind of goes south into Orange County. It's not a route that's particularly productive for us. There's probably a need for employment reasons for those folks, but we met with them to say Route 1 does not look like it's something that's potentially very feasible and maybe a deletion, and we talked to them about potential alternatives. So with that, I'll now just switch a little bit and talk about the RFP and the solicitation update. As mentioned, we put out a scope that was very broad and said, send us what you think's a good idea, what type of information you think suits us. So we didn't provide a whole lot of framework for it, and that was by design to try to solicit different ideas. So we got those. After that, we met 2 hours with each vendor that we had. There are 3 vendors that proposed for us. We sat down with each one of them to try to understand their proposals, their capabilities, and we also wanted to highlight the county. We wanted to talk about our demographics, what transit looks here, what board direction we'd previously gotten, and we used these 2-hour meetings to develop a consensus with the vendor on both service level and goals. We also talked about cost control measures. This is an extended contract. We talked about what that potentially looks like, and because it's a longer term contract, this would provide us limited annual increases. So what we got from that was, they're all different. When we kind of had a bunch of conversations, we kind of come to a consensus as to what things would look like. But as part of that, we decided we'd put out an apples to apples comparison. So we did a standardization and pricing exercise that we gave to each vendor. So it provided a constant list of what the Links route changes would likely to be, so that way they were kind of all on the same playing field. We provided an anticipated service level for each of them to get on the same service level. We did this again to create standardization. We did advise all 3 vendors that this is ultimately a board decision. As staff, we're trying to get to a standardization, but the board will have to weigh on what the policy decision is, and that will potentially defy definitive changes. So the next few slides we're going to go through, we'll just talk about that standardization exercise and what it looked like, what kind of the recommended structure that they were being provided was for them to come back to us. So the first one was service level assumptions. We talked about the total service area. For purposes of the exercise, we said we should include the entire county, excluding the rural boundary. we pick this because right now, it's a linear system that goes through, but it is kind of touching a lot of the area that's not, that is the whole county other than the rural boundary, albeit some people may be a long way for that, but it is kind of getting that. So we told the vendors we didn't care whether it was single zones or multiple zones, but we did not want to see a transfer. We wanted it to be free for people to go wherever, and that was for purposes of it. So just the next slides that we're going to talk a little bit about is about the fixed route service that we have and then the changes here. So this slide is just kind of a refresher as to what we have today. To boil it down to the very basic form, we kind of have fixed route services on all of our major state roads. That's not 100%, but it's pretty close. Our major corridors in the county have fixed route services. This map depicts that. What we suggested for purposes of the exercise was that all routes be removed with the exception of the 436 route. The 1792 route be reduced to the Fern Park Superstop, which is by the old High Line. We also said that the western portion of the 434 route, which is actually called Link 23, that come up from Orange County and stop at Seminole State College in Altamont. On the east side of the county on 434, which is the 434 route, we propose that to stop at McCulloch Road, which is basically the county line. And then we have this route that runs, just clips the corner of the county, Route 106, and we kind of have one stop there, and it's in Orange County. That one stop is pretty productive. We just said leave it alone. It's not a very expensive route. It's a through connector. It goes through. There's a lot of service. So the next slide is actually a graphical depiction of everything I just said. This was something that was provided in one of our vendor, what I'll call re-proposals as a response to that standardization exercise. And you can kind of see here what we're talking about. So the points are the new routes would be the orange. As you can see, it's comes up starting on the east side, just right there at the county line on 434. And then as you move further to the left, 436 stays as it is. 1792 comes up and finishes at the bottom of the county in Fern Park, and then 23 comes up in Altamont. So one thing to note from all this is, even with all these reductions, the regionalism of what was being proposed in that exercise stays the same. The connectivity into Orange County stays the same, with the exception of that Route 1, which is just not a very big performer. So, and just also as another point, if you're in and around Route 1, there are other options to kind of transfer through the Superstop. So I just want to point this out because we heard a lot about regionalism the last time we were here, and this was part of the effort to get there. So that's that. We also suggested the vendors keep a schedule that's a 7-day-a-week schedule when the proposals came in. Some of them were 6-day-a-week schedules. We currently have a 7-day-a-week schedule, so this is the schedule on the screen we suggested to them: Monday through Friday, 5 a.m. to 9 p.m., Saturday, 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., and Sunday, 6 a.m. to 8 p.m. During some of our briefings, we got questions about, well, what is our current hours of links and things like that. So the short answer is it depends, but I'm going to give a bucketed answer. So of the ones we are talking about reducing here, they pretty much maintain the schedule that we're suggesting here. That's it. The other ones run from, the ones that we're keeping, runs from, depending on the route, 4 a.m. to 1 in the morning. So we're not adjusting that. What we're looking at here kind of stays consistent with what we're reducing. So I just wanted to provide that feedback. It come up a number of times, and I apologize for not having a slide on it. We also mentioned to the vendors that we wanted a fare structure that was quite a bit different from Links. So right now, Links fares, in my opinion, kind of target the customers with the greatest need. We kind of wanted to turn that model on its head a little bit. We wanted to look at a fare structure that was based upon other market alternatives for transportation, and then provide discounts from that for people that are in maybe a more vulnerable population and things like that. We also suggested there should be some level of discount to sub-rail users. As mentioned at the very beginning of this is an on-demand service, so we said we need to have maximum pickup times of 30 minutes Monday through Saturday, and then Sunday 60 minutes. The reason for the Sunday reduction is, one, is our service for the Link stuff is reduced on Sunday, but it also serves as a cost control measure. And then we also talked to them and said, hey, it is a shared service. We want you to provide what the inconvenience or detour times are. And what that means is if I'm going to, I book a route to go point A to point B, Tim books a route that's on the way, but he wants to go to point C, they'll look at Tim's ride and say, okay, if he's within the inconvenience or detour stuff of, say, 10 minutes, it's okay to pick Tim up. They'll divert, pick Tim up and go. If Tim's ride is going to take me 30 minutes out of the way, and that's outside of their parameters, they would say, okay, sorry, Tim, Kirsten, you go on. Tim, a different vehicle comes to pick you up. So we asked them to specify what those times were in there. We also said we were expecting there to be revenue to come back from advertising opportunities. That's both in vehicle. So some of you may have gone to some other metropolitan areas and you see the screens in the seat and you get ads playing to you. They also indicated to us that you can use these for public service announcements as well. So if we wanted to put something out, hurricane time, hurricane, is coming or whatever, we could do that. Or, hey, we got this event at the park, we could do that. But we could also play advertisements and get revenue from it. And then we also talked about exterior vehicle advertising with wraps and things like that, and that being a revenue source. So we put all that together, and we put it together with the hope of having apples to apples. Well, with all good hopes, they don't quite go just to that. So we got closer. Things were much better. We were no longer apples to ham slices. We were apples to pears now. And that's what we want to talk a little bit about more. But we spent an hour going through each one of the vendors' responses to those exercises to just further understand them and go from there. And don't get me wrong, the exercise was very beneficial. It just didn't quite get us there, and it did realize to us that we need to get back in front of you all to get some feedback to really go further. So here are some of the issues that were highlighted by the vendors. Yeah, we kind of thought that, hey, if you make things expensive enough, people won't go. That's kind of basic, economics that we all had. We got some comments that fare structure may not control rider habits of distance. So there were some case studies they had that basically, they tried to say, okay, we'll make it expensive to go a long distance, maybe a more premium than other services out there. And riders that have seen from other areas have said, we're okay paying that. We have the means, we're okay paying it. We like a background check rider, we like knowing what the vehicle looks like showing up, and all the things that come with a consistency of a public system. So as a result of that, it was actually taking vehicles out of service for some of the vulnerable population, and it was turning into more of an affluent ridership. So we were cautioned on that. So what we were recommended by really some of the vendors was that they recommended multiple zones with transfers or a limitation to how far you have to go without a transfer. So that was a comment we heard from some of them. We also got the comment that there should be some deep discounts for Sunrail. We're paying for Sunrail. We should try to encourage ridership on that and get that. So that was one thing that they looked at, as long as it's a Sunrail rider going to the station to get on there. Not just that, hey, I have an annual pass and I don't use it, but we're dropping you off at the station. And then we were introduced to an interesting concept called a flex zone concept. And I'm going to spend, we're going to go to this slide, I'm going to spend a couple of minutes on this. So this is kind of a hybrid approach. The zones I talked about has cars or vehicles tethered within these zones. So as you look at this graphic, you'll see an area that says flex around it, but then you'll see some different colored areas that don't say flex. So those areas have vehicles tethered in them. The fare is cheaper if you stay within that area, and that is such because you can actually populate them with less vehicles. If you want to travel between one color to another, or from flex into one of the zones, then the fare structure shifts slightly, and it goes to a per mile basis. So it's a little bit more expensive, and then it goes by mile. It's more of, if you think of it as a taxi cab thing with the meter running, it's not quite that. They're talking about blocks of distance. But this was an approach that was given to us as an idea to control vehicle count. Not necessarily control ridership, but to control vehicle count to minimize the number of vehicles and yet still provide a service that people could go quite a distance. So this was presented to us as part of those. Now we'll talk a little bit about pricing. So the slide that you have up in front of you is a range slide. We had 3 vendors providing proposals. One vendor provided multiple proposals. And this is kind of the bookends of all those brought together in one place. So as you'll see, there was a swing on the service hour rates. There was also a swing as a result of that on what does it cost per vehicle to put them out there. The next slide is probably more important than those other two things because those two are really straightforward. Different vendors have different cost structures. The next two is how many vehicles that we need. So you look at the 20 and then you look at the 70. It depends on, these are the bookends. It depends upon what our ridership is, coming out. We all don't know. Everyone's putting this into their kind of, their algorithms to say. So that's the low end. And then it's also less vehicles when you do zones and transfers than when you do a wide open, everyone can go anywhere. And the reason for that is, if you're in Sanford and then I book a ride to drive to Oviedo, I may pick up a few people on the way, but that vehicle is now out of service from grabbing other riders until it not only gets to Oviedo, but it gets all the way back to its home place in Sanford. So these zones are strict. That flex zone is kind of the concept on there. So you see that in turn, you look at the proposed costs, and the costs are kind of commensurate, truthfully, to the number of vehicles. The more vehicles you put out, the bigger the area, the more demand, the less restrictions on it, the more expensive. You tighten it up, you put less vehicles on it, no one rides it, it's cheaper. And then you'll see the fare revenue swinging as well, 300,000 to 2 million. Obviously, the more cars, the more riders, higher the fare. Less cars, less riders, lower the fare. And then the same corresponds to the advertising revenue. So with that, we're kind of at the board input and policy directions. We got a series of questions here. They're probably not the end-all, be-all questions, but they're just trying to get feedback from y'all so then we can go back to the vendors and then ultimately bring something back for y'all to make a decision with. So with that, I'll start with the first one, if I may just go through them individually.
Sure, does anybody have any questions of what's been presented thus far before we get into the direction requests?
I think we all have questions, but I think we're waiting. We'll let him finish his program.
Okay. All right, sir, proceed with your asks.
I'll start with the first one. So as you heard in the kind of our pricing exercise, we said vendors look at the whole county, excluding the rural boundary. So we really need some feedback from the board. Did staff get that correct? Did we not? And that's kind of the question. So yes, that's correct. No, it's not, or you'd like to see it some other way. And
okay.
I'm going to get my pen here to take some notes.
Let's start with Commissioner Lockhart at the far end and work our way across to Commissioner Herr.
So we're going to do like rapid fire?
Yeah,
Okay.
on questions.
Okay, so I would say yes, because that's even an expansion of the service we have now.
Commissioner Constantine?
Yes. Also, the fact that the rural boundary is not conducive to the type of density that you need to have, mass transit.
I would say yes, but I'd like to know, and I'm not trying to make this more complicated, is there areas that Lynx is not serving this county now? And what will those areas be today?
So I'll give a hybrid answer. So if you stay on the main routes, they're kind of getting that area. But they're on the main routes. So you could argue that if you live 2 miles off the system, they're not serving the area.
That's my point.
Yeah, so I'll bring this back to school bus kind of routes. I was at the school system for a while. So the school has a walking distance that people can go to be on a route, and then they feed in other routes. What we have currently is the routes on the major route. Some of them may be a further distance than what would be acceptable to a school bus rider.
Again, if you're a mile off that main route, you're not in the Lynx service area.
Right.
That's my
Yeah.
point.
Yep, okay, understood.
See my-
Now I get what you were saying, yeah.
That's why I'm saying it that way.
Okay.
I would also be a yes, just reminding that the rural boundary, that based on what you've given us thus far, part of that rural boundary is in the Black Hammock, and portions of the Black Hammock are covered in this mapping exercise. So it would not be the entire rural boundary that would be omitted, but basically it's mirroring what's available now. So I'm a yes on that.
I'm a yes on that because I really don't think they want our little cars running around in that neighborhood.
All right, so then the next one, I'm gonna turn it over to Tim. Tim is our finance guy, and we go back and forth on this a bunch. He does more than just clicking. We debate this out a bunch. So I'm gonna turn the next few slides over to Tim.
Thank you, Christian. So the next question is the staff recommendation of fixed route and Lynx service changes as presented acceptable. And before we turn it over to the board, we wanted to give a little context. This is a snapshot of the current FY25 costs that the county is paying for the routes that are being discussed for reduction. These are based on the $105 Links funding partner rate. You'll note that the FY26 budget for next year has not been set, so we don't know exactly what the savings would be for the elimination of these routes, but we do know that there might be an increase in the rate, the funding partner rate that Links charges, as the fixed cost that Links is paying gets spread out across the fewer routes. We also wanted to note that currently we're in the process of setting the budget for FY26 for Links, so we would be providing them with the expected service level at this time, and then they'll use those services to set our budget. So we would look to also notify Links as soon as possible after this meeting of any proposed route changes. With that, I'll turn it over to the board.
Okay. We'll start with Commissioner Herr and come the other way.
Yes, and whatever Sears catalog approach we're taking to the designing of this program, I expect it to come in at less than what the reduction is to this cost.
Ditto. Same here. Commissioner Delory?
By reducing these, how many people are we actually affecting that ride these routes on a regular basis?
We did an exercise that you may recall.
I
when
know, I asked you to do it.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. So, just to refresh everyone, we did an exercise when we presented this at the November board meeting. We think there's about 3,500 to maybe 4,200 people that ride Links. So that's what we believe our ridership is. Yeah. The numbers are very difficult to get from the ridership and to talk about how we got there. You know, the way Links does ridership is you're an on or off, and then they add the ridership to the whole route. So when they give you route ridership, if it goes into Orange County, it gets there. Tim and I did some mathematical exercises, taking that ridership, looking at it, and then actually putting it into transit studies based on usage, and that's where we drilled it down. And I think I use the term, it's an 80% answer. No one knows for sure, but
Not even Links.
not even Links. But we think between 3,500 and 4,200 is our best guess.
And Commissioner, I've been trying to get that answer out of Links for 6 years, and they've yet to be able to supply me a dead answer, so I'm not sure how we identify that specifically.
And if I could, Mr. Chairman, that 3,500 to 4,200 ridership, when you talk about what's impacted, it's not all those people that are impacted. The majority of all the routes that staff is requesting to keep are the ones that are utilized. The ones that we are looking to eliminate are the ones that are not used.
So the ones that we're thinking about eliminating, what classified not being used? Is it nobody on the bus? Is it less than X amount of people on the bus?
Yeah. So we obviously had some data from Links, and we sat there and we looked at that. But in addition, I think it's very important to talk about what Mr. Tweed did. So, Mr. Tweed got on, we put him on, and we put him on as a rider, and we tried to get him during peak times, commuting times. Not all of them were at that, but they were. The busiest routes was the 436 route, which we're not suggesting cutting. I have the handy dandy number on that bus. The total passengers that got on were 40. He spent the entire route on there. So that's what he experienced there. We think that's pretty good. We think that's a pretty good representation. He's there weekday. He's at rush hour. He also looked at the 1792 route. He did the whole thing. When he looked at that, that was 13 people were the max riders on at any given time. And that one, we are suggesting stopping it at Fern Park. There is a busy section, the 103, that goes from Fern Park to the Seminole Center, which is the Walmart on 1792. But we think with it being engulfed in a potential microtransit zone based upon everything we've seen here, the riders will flock to that. And they're not levels that can't be handled by microtransit. The 434 route, the third most busiest one, he saw 9 riders. You start getting to the 46 routes and things like that, there's a max of 4 riders on there. And we've saw some of those when we did our analysis looking at it. You look at that 46 route that runs from the Sanford Sunrail Station to the mall on Sunday, it actually has, by Lynx's own documents, a half a rider per route on it. So that gives you kind of an idea what we looked at.
So you're able to document the ridership on the ones that you're suggesting to eliminate have next to zero ridership?
They have a small number, that's correct.
Okay, and you're saying somewhere in the single digits?
The one, that's true with the exception of the 103, and because he did it as kind of a blended route, there is possibly low teens. He had 13 riders on there. But these microtransit vehicles, and I should have probably said this at the start, the vendors are looking at vans, 6-passenger vans. So basically 2 microtransit vehicles, could almost take the whole ride of that kind of thing. And those people are, just to kind of go on, the folks that are riding it, depending on the schedule, some of the ridership is hour-long routes. Some of it are 30 minutes. The 1792 is 30 minutes, so it's a bit more frequently. But some of them, like you may see the 434, it goes hourly. You saw 9 people get on there, but, they all had to wait an hour to get to that. You split it out over that, it's going to be much more reduced.
Okay, so that'll be a yes then.
Okay, thank you.
I'm just trying to get...
No, these are great questions, and we like the dialogue, so thank you.
Mr. Constein?
Okay, this mysterious bus rider. When you say it was never more than 16 or 13 or a half a person, is this one time, or how many times did he ride this bus?
He rode it one time during rush hour on a weekday, but we can compare that, which he did, to what the weekday average ridership is. He saw numbers that were close, albeit less than that, but he did see them. The data he took was that boarding and alighting data. Lynx actually has it on their webpage where you can click a stop and go, one person got on, none got off. Next stop, no one gets on, no one gets off. And you can go route by route. He actually downloaded that information, sat there, and every stop, he documented who got on, not who personally, but the number that got on and the number that got off, and then compared that to what the average is. I think the numbers he come up with were a pretty good representation of what the ridership is.
Okay, so what we have now is a bus service. What we're talking about is more of a limo service, more of a premier limo service as opposed to a bus service. So the importance is who absolutely has to have the bus service. Those folks. And what I'm saying is, if we are looking at the routes that you have indicated that are the most productive and get to the actual places, then my answer at this point to that question is a yes. To the question that you've asked, is staff recommending fixed route and Lynx changes? I can say yes to that currently, although the caveats are, how do we make sure that the folks that absolutely address, and we'll get to this. I don't want to get into it right now. That's later on in the question. Okay, but yes, the answer is yes now with a caveat.
I do just want to point something out just for the audience, because and I know the term limo service, and there's a limo service that handles. There's not a limo coming. It's not a stretch limousine or anything like that. And I know that goes without saying, and that's not what you meant. But I don't want anyone watching seeing that. These are minivans designed to be nimble.
We're not talking about a
through
black Uber.
Oh, that's correct. We're not talking about that. So I just want anyone watching, I don't want them to think, hey, great, I'll get my app and I can go to the prom. I don't want them to think that kind of
And there's
thing.
multiple riders.
Right. That's correct. They can take up to 6 people is what they can take. They're ADA accessible. They'll have bike racks and things like that. These were all things in our original scope of work that we put out there that were basics. We want to make sure that these basic things are covered without making the parameters. When we did the pricing exercise, we said all that carries over plus these other items. So.
And also, part of the caveat is, it's some other things that folks have said here today is we really don't know who, the 35 to 42, is that an actual number, or is that 4,200 over, the same people over and over again that makes the 4,200?
No, that is not people over and over again. That is the people. So the numbers we get from links when they say ridership data is the people over and over again. It's basically, instead of using the term ridership, it's probably more easy to understand if you say ticket sales. So that's what ridership data is. The numbers we come up with is we took the American Transit Association, I think that's what it's called, I apologize if I get it wrong. They put out a survey around the nation of what ridership habits are. Lynx actually was someone that responded to this, and then it breaks out how many riders on average ride 1 day a week, 2 days a week, et cetera, et cetera. We took those numbers and we did some math gymnastics to come back and say, this is what we think the base folks look like based upon the percentages in each category, and that's where we come up with that range. And that's why I say it's an 80% number.
I want to explore the commissioners to make sure I'm understanding what's happening here in those numbers.
Okay.
I think what the commissioner is asking, to an extent, we really can't answer, just from the perspective of, if I get on the bus and I go to point B, but then point B is maybe an employer who then takes me to an employer's sub-area, remote office, somewhere else in the county, and I get back on. Lynx has no idea when I bought the ticket whether I'm the same person or not.
Yeah, and to show you, that is correct. And
I want to make sure of that.
Well, and to show even a better one, so let's say I start at the county line on 1792 and I have to ride to Sanford. There's 3 routes and 2 transfers I'm going to take. I'm one person. I'm going to show up as 3 different riders because I've got 3 different, there's a sensor when you get on the bus and get off. That sensor's counted me coming on. Boom. I'm on. So it counts me as 3 people. So, you know, this is where this gets a little murky as far as we get back to the low vehicles, the medium vehicles, and the high. Everyone's taking their algorithm to guess, and we've got our 80% math to say how many riders we think are out there. I can tell you we're wrong. You know, it's probably 3501 or 4202, something like that. It's an estimate. They're doing the same.
And I think the commissioner, I don't want to put words in your mouth.
No, and I want to finish after you finish.
I think what he was asking is, how many people in our community have the need to ride this? Not how many people based on sales of tickets,
Yeah,
which is a totally different number.
And let me add to that. I don't think we really know.
Yeah.
Okay. And I don't think we also have ever explored, and I'm not saying it's our job. I want to say, because I really do believe that you've done a lot of work and we've learned a lot, and I'll repeat that over and over again in my discussion. But I don't think we've really, and nor has Lynx, and I think it's more their responsibility than ours. But, establish the efficiencies of the routes that we have. How can we maximize those routes to the people that actually need them? I don't think that has ever been done. That exercise has never been done. And I think that's part of what we're talking about here when it comes to, am I okay with the routes that you've changed and presented? Yeah, because that's the numbers. All we're really doing is looking at the numbers that we have today and what are the highest numbers, and therefore hoping that is going to fill the need, the real need of those people that are using it. But we really, in all honesty, don't know.
I would agree with that. I'll tell you, going to this process, it's not about passing a beam and getting counted 3 times. You get a rider profile, and we'll know exactly. Going to this type of thing, we'll be able to have the analytics. You'll be able to see, because they're very much to your point. There are people that probably would ride this that is too far, to Commissioner Delari's point, that is too far to walk to where they're going, and they're not currently a customer and they have a need. We can't see that now. The type of data and analytics that'll come from this, not only will we know the wait times within, hey, the average pickup time is 23 minutes, we'll know what percentage they get to that. But we'll also know where people get dropped off, and we'll get where a true ridership map is, and to your point, where a true need is.
And on that statement, that would surmise, with all that data being collected, that we could adjust this program moving forward.
That is completely correct. This is a very scalable thing. and you saw the ranges of vehicles. If we get in and we think, hey, we're low and then it's high, okay, great, we can adjust it. If it's high and it should be low, we can adjust it. If we miss, we made some ideas on times, and we'll make some, there'll be some confirmation or revisions made here today. If we get in and they're not the case, we can adjust them, and that's all very scalable.
Chairman?
Yes. Commissioner Lockhart hasn't weighed on this, but
okay.
yes,
I'm good.
go ahead.
This has opened up a whole can of worms, though. I'm going to go back to, we're spending $9.8 million right now, and adjusting doesn't mean we're going to start spending $15, $20 million on this, because this could be rather convenient, and we have an untapped need. My concern is the complete opposite of Commissioner Delari's concern, is that who are we not going to be serving after we do this? This is going to open up a service level that becomes tolerable to a much larger portion of our population than the current bus
I'm
system.
going to get to that part. That's-
Yeah, I think we're all going to get to that part.
Right.
So
That wasn't the question.
we have to be very cognizant of data collection around, were you a Lynx rider before? We are trying to fill the need that Lynx is filling right now and improve service, but not to the detriment of the rest of the taxpaying citizens in this county that are not taking this system.
Right.
I want to be
Commissioner-
super clear.
And Commissioner, that's why I'm holding my tongue. I'm trying to establish something so as we get it back into it, after we get the answers or the questions answered for him, then we start talking about the ramifications that you just indicated. Because I think there's a lot.
Well, I agree with
we're opening
you
it up.
that
We're
once we
opening
do
up
this, there's going to be a lot more riders. A lot more riders.
Well, I think,
But let's talk about that after we finish.
yeah.
Yep,
let's-
next, in the pricing
Commissioner-
question.
Let's let
Commissioner
Lockhart
Lockhart.
talk.
Are you a fan or not?
I think that the changes that you're proposing are completely appropriate, and I want to continue to reiterate as much as possible, we are not taking a bus away from anyone that we are not replacing with a better service. You will not be standing out in the sun waiting for a bus that may or may not be on time, mostly not on time. It will actually take you where you want it to go. So I would be okay over time, potentially, if we find that that needs to be further honed, doing that as well.
Now you get to answer first. Now you get to answer first.
I did the answer. My answer is yes.
No, the next question. Answer first.
Thank you. Okay, the fare structure, so as mentioned, Lynx has based their fares on serving the people maybe with the greatest need or the greatest challenge, and it's kind of based up from there. We looked at, we suggested turning that on its head, making a fare that is somewhat linked to what alternate transportation options are out there. So, things like Uber, things like Lyft. So that was kind of our idea. We thought, and you'll see some other slides about discounts and things like that coming from, but we want to make sure that y'all agree for that that's not maybe the common transit thing. I think Lynx is probably more on the common transit thing, but from our perspective, when we went through the pricing exercise and looked at it, people that can maybe afford to pay for this, right, to Commissioner Herr's point, it does help, control who's riding it. I mean, if we're giving away free rides to everyone, we can all get rid of our cars. So I don't think that's where we want to be, and then having a fare to make that makes it the case.
Commissioner Lockhart, we'll start at your end.
And can I just add, and as Christian mentioned, the next couple questions are talking about the discounts as well.
Right.
So I just want to make sure that we are going to cover that regarding different populations.
So my short answer is yes. My more expanded answer is that I agree with the analysis of starting at a fare that is reasonable so that the general taxpayer of Seminole County is not subsidizing to as great a degree as they are now for Lynx, because the fare studies have not been done in years. And so it's the same fare as they were paying, however many, 1990, whatever it was. So I think being more in line with the market makes us actually less of a competitor with the market. I think if we were to start low, that would make us more of a competition. But I think the people who want that individual ride service from an Uber or a Lyft that know that someone else is not going to be getting picked up on the way, they're still going to use that service. I'm excited about the possibility that some of these, if not all of these, proposers have to help us identify those who are the most vulnerable and offer discounts as appropriate based on the rider or the destination. And I think that's where it gets, I want to say fun, but that's where we get to really decide how much we want to subsidize which types of rides. So that's my long yes.
Okay.
That's a short answer.
Commissioner Constantine.
Okay. I think the next two questions are linked. Not wanting to use the word links, but are linked.
They are the next three, actually, are all kind of linked. So if you want, I can read them all now.
No, well, okay, if you wanted to.
Well, I don't know. I think you might want to go through each of these separate. I mean,
Okay,
that's my
so
vote.
I agree.
I'm going to.
I agree.
We're going to do it separate, but I'm going to say, going to the next one, to me, the biggest problem here in the fare situation, the fare rate situation, is identifying what's vulnerable. What does vulnerable mean? Is it somebody that is, handicapped, has a handicap sticker? I mean, you don't. And also, it brings up the question that I brought up that Commissioner Herr and others, Commissioner Delory, and everybody, let me just say everybody, is, we don't want to start a process that's going to open this up so much that we all want to use it. But at the same time, if we start doing the fare based upon Uber, that's going to eliminate, the people that are potentially using it now, that truly need it, truly need a way to get from one place to another. So should the base rate be based upon transportation available, such as Uber? I'm not familiar with Uber's prices as much as probably others. But I would say that we have to, if we do that, yes, for those that don't need the service, and no for those that do need the service.
Can I just,
Sure.
real quick? So I think one of the things that maybe we could add to the question that changes the answer a little bit is, should the base fare be based upon other transportation available, such as Uber? Not, the based upon, is, from my perspective, is a percentage of, or a, it's not mirroring it, it's not matching it, but it would be 50% of, or 25% of, or 70%, not that it's going to be identical and matching, because Uber and Lyft change their rates based on how popular a particular area is at a time. So I think the question is a little bit misleading now that I'm reading it again and hearing someone else ask a question based on it, because I don't think we are talking at all about making our fares variable like an Uber or a Lyft are.
Yeah, let me just kind of add some clarity as to what the intent was with the question. You're exactly right. So instead of, we're looking at what the alternatives are. This is not Uber or Lyft. This picks up people. Commissioner Hurd mentioned that. There are things like that. But making it a percentage of, if it costs $7 to go on Uber from point A to point B, we're potentially loading 6 other customers up there. Maybe having a rate that is a percentage, 50% of it, then that's a reasonable fare, as opposed to saying the person that, the person that is perhaps, unemployed, makes minimum wage, those kind of economic share can only afford $2 a ticket. That's a much different thing, and we're looking at, as you described it, to try to base it on what a percentage of that fare is, not being the same, because it isn't the same, but adjusting the market as to what that is. And we were not talking, unless the board directs us to be doing peak hour fares and rate adjustments and things like that. I think we're just trying to establish a normal hour fare based upon this as an alternative means.
Mr. Delory?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not to get into the weeds, I would say yes. However, I know, Christian, you're talking about not having dynamic pricing like dynamic tolling, I get that. And we need to know what the average cost is per that zone. I mean, all the zones going to be priced the same? Or is it going to be different cost going to different zones? I haven't seen any of that yet.
Well, and that's why we want to kind of get to what you're looking at, because if you decide one zone, then there would obviously probably be a per mile charge.
I understand that, but that's why I'm asking.
Yeah.
In philosophical, yes, but the devil's in the details, and, how you get to those details is going to be the issue.
Fair enough.
So my short answer is yes, but it's much more complicated than that. I have no interest in competing against the private sector, being Uber and Lyft to begin with, number one. Number two, I think the ridership will ultimately dictate the pricing schedule based on as this unfolds and develops. Whether you use one zone or multiple zones, there are going to be some zones, just like, quite frankly, that you have now with the bus schedule, that you have more ridership than others. Our advantage is those vehicles can be moved to a different zone to accommodate those changes. And I do believe it should be based on our actual cost when you get down to it. Because at the end of the day, I mean, Uber and Lyft do have carpooling options. In other words, you can pay less if you want to take a little extra time and pick somebody else up at this hotel or here, blah, blah, blah. But would people who typically don't ride a bus ride this? I hope they do, because that could help offset the overall cost for somebody that may want to take it. In other words, I could take this, whatever it is, one of the routes from point A to point B. If I'm not in a great big hurry, if I got to get there now, I'm calling Uber. But I could take this, if I've got ample time, I should be expected to pay a premium price, but not an Uber or Lyft price, but something that would be palatable, that would be different than somebody that truly has a need would be less. So, short answer is yes, thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Hurd.
First of all, I think supply and demand matter. I had a college professor that taught me that. I actually went to those classes. We cannot set the fare too low. We will be digging out of that hole forever. The studies that you referenced were long distance, so you could set the fare pretty high for a long distance ride because the market drives a very high price for a long distance ride, and none of these are long distance rides. So that study didn't correlate to the answer of we shouldn't set the fare high enough to, and I'm going to use words that no one's using yet, but you were there, make it a self-sustaining program.
Mm-hmm.
So it needs to sustain itself while at the same time it's supporting the vulnerable members of society that cannot afford a car, that can have no other choice and need to get to work, doctors, hospitals, et cetera. And I don't for 1 minute think that mass transit is a profit generator, but this cannot be a huge fiscal drain on this organization. And if we don't do this well, it will be. The expectations have to be set clearly. The cost should align with the value of the service, and that is not what we are wired to do as government. And so we need to flip that paradigm. That is how we got into this with links, and we don't want to do it to ourselves.
Amen. Does that give you the answers you need on that one?
I think it does.
Okay.
All right, the next one, and we were kind of touching all around on this one, but
Right.
discounts for vulnerable populations, and we've got some listed here. These may not be ones that are palatable, but we've said low income, disabled, seniors, homeless, students, things of that nature.
And just for the public, I want to make sure in my briefing, so there's clarity, these are ADA-equipped vehicles, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
That's correct.
We'll start with Commissioner Hurd and work our way across on this one.
I don't think we need to hash at this point through all of this level of detail. The answer is yes to vulnerable populations, to be determined based on which vendor and how they're going to determine the vulnerability of the population. They need to be managing this. This is not, we build a department, we hire 4 people that are going to determine the vulnerability of a population, I hope.
I concur. Commissioner Delory?
The only question, one of the questions I have, Christian, is that we actually did a study for the region through MetroPlan, and they were saying that 25% of all medical appointments through paramedicine was being missed, the appointments. How is that should be addressing through here somehow with the hospitals and the doc's appointments? Because that's a vulnerable population that's not getting to their appointments, and that's not, there's an issue, and I don't know how you address it.
So I think you're talking about the paratransit service that they're getting with links,
It's not
is
just
that correct?
paratransit, it's the elderly population. And you
So-
have seniors here, that's,
I have seniors. Well, I'll touch on the paratransit a little bit. Obviously, they'll get kind of the same service. There is these discounts can work to an advantage. We showed you the numbers on fixed route. The paratransit is a cost we're spending about $5 million a year to links. If this becomes palatable and cheaper for them and more convenient, they could come off of that service and come to us. It's cheaper to provide this type of service than it is to provide a paratransit service. You could make an argument that you could even reduce it down to the barest of bare bones, and still we would be money ahead on it because it's a cheaper service. With it being for the seniors, with it being the 30-minute on-demand, I think it's, from my personal opinion, that's my personal opinion, I think it's taxing for someone that's maybe elderly, maybe with a walker, things like that, to get to a bus stop if they're not on paratransit or they're not on TD. So I would think this will become a very reliable service for them. And obviously, the discounts would help maybe make someone mobile and not housebound that currently is.
so with the vulnerable with these vulnerable population guidelines, who determines that?
So we can do it a couple of ways. The vendor has offered to do some things. We can work with community services. Tim or I are not the right people to do it. There are people that do this, that know this business. And I think truthfully, probably the answer I would recommend would be work with the vendor, with community services, and maybe some of the community partners as well. And Darren, I think, has something to add.
Yeah, and then ultimately, that's a recommendation that would come back to this board, and then you all would direct us how you would want those vulnerable populations to be.
Thank you.
Commissioner Constantine.
To add to what Commissioner Delory said, I think in that same study, they indicated that those going to appointments, medical appointments, more than half were going from one county to another.
Correct.
So, and this has nothing to do with another county.
That is correct. I mean,
I just was pointing that, go ahead.
Yeah, the paratransit does do that. They can go out of the county. I think that the hope of people that may be on paratransit or TD now is we try to encourage those riders staying within the county to go there and then transfer that. I don't think we have any interest in trying to create a service to drive someone to Shands.
Yeah, okay. So, again, I don't want to get into the nitty-gritty of this, but this is as important as to how this is going to be successful as anything we do. Who is really the vulnerable people? And I would just say a couple of things. Just because you're a student, shouldn't get a discount. There are students that are coming from different locations that, can afford it a lot more than others. Just because you're a senior, that you shouldn't get a discount. They have more discretionary, the senior population has more discretionary income than most. If you're a low-income senior, absolutely. But if you're a senior like myself or Darren, you should not get. Well, your birthday's coming up, so should not.
I'm classified as a senior.
Yeah, there you go. Should not get it. I was just teasing. Should not get it. And I think that is, as I said, this is as important as anything we do because, again, it's identifying the people that really need it and that are using the bus. And the last people we want to take out of this system is those few that are actually using it.
Right. Commissioner Lockhart.
So I will say yes to discounts, and I will say that our community services department is already helping to determine who is vulnerable because they are the ones that are providing the Lynx bus passes now at a discounted rate, and purchasing them and handing them out, as is ROM and Christian Sharing Center and Recovery Connections, and a plethora of people who are currently buying Lynx passes for their people who can now purchase passes, and they would be the so we would be essentially, this is a possibility, selling a number of rides to those agencies, and they would determine who they give them out to in their organizations and how that occurs. I think that's how that's happening now with Lynx and Ubers and Lyfts, is that correct?
I believe so. I think that they are buying passes for Uber and Lyft to go things. There are things of that nature. There is the pre-qualification and things on that. So I think you're accurate on that.
As far as students are concerned, Seminole State College, I believe, spends I'll use the very specific phrase, boatload of money that goes to Lynx every year so that our students can ride for free to the student. It doesn't mean that it's a free ride to the vendor. Those rides are paid for by the institution. So I think as we work with partners, and including private sector businesses who want to include it as a part of an employee benefits package, free to the rider versus no payment to us are two different things. And so I think that's an important distinction in this conversation as well. So I think that I would add a caveat or a question part B to this would be not just for the individual riding, but for the location, the destination. So if you are taking a trip to the health department, perhaps that's a discounted rate. If you are going to the Christian Sharing Center, that perhaps is a discounted rate. You know that the people who are maybe going and accessing those services there inherently are vulnerable. So that's just another way that this could be approached that I'd like us to look at as well.
And if Mr. Chair, I'm sorry, you wanted to speak?
So, real quick, and I'll go to the questions. Just to point out, it's 12:30, we got public hearing at 1:30. What's going to be the flavor of the board? You want to work on through, forget lunch, or
Yes.
Yeah.
do you want to get to a stopping point and then come back?
We're on a roll.
Okay.
We're close.
Commissioner Herr, and then Commissioner Constantine, then Commissioner Delory.
Just a couple of things to point out. Healthcare has changed whenever that survey was done. There has not been the expansion of services in this county, so you no longer have to go across county lines for cancer treatment, surgeries, et cetera, et cetera. So that survey is probably outdated. With regard to employee benefits, it's typically done through a TSA, similar to an FSA, but for transportation, so it wouldn't be a direct purchase, more than likely, if they were smart. So I think those levels of detail just happen later. I think the word that we haven't said out loud is needs-based. We danced all around it. I think Commissioner Constantine got, like, those who need it, but it should be needs-based, is kind of where I think we're aligning.
And I was going to clarify one thing, but I want to clarify the other. That study was based upon going to doctor's visits, and it was found that, people have preferences for doctors. So even if you have it available in Seminole County, a lot of them were just going to where they thought was their doctor.
Most of those doctors now have dual offices. The model has
Perfect.
changed.
So saying that, I also wanted to clarify the students. We were putting 15 and over in here. I'm looking at high school students saying, hey, wouldn't it be cool if I got picked up and didn't take the bus, and paid less? I'm serious. I mean, the mentality of a high school student.
Then the taxpayers pay for it.
That's what I'm saying. We have to be very careful about that when we're talking about vulnerable population. Just because you're a student, I'm 15 years old, I'm going to Lyman. When I was back in school, I would sit there and, okay, I'm going to look cool today. I'm going to go in and in this instead. So I'm using that as why just the word students is not vulnerable.
on that point?
Yes.
Yes.
So I think for the purpose of brevity, these questions and these categories were put up here. There are certainly expandable, we could qualify that they have to be a dual enrollment student. We know who those students are. They could be identified if that's what this board chooses to do. We could say that they have to be they're going to an after-school activity. The school district does not provide transportation for many after-school activities. There are things that people in our community are missing out on participating in because they don't have transportation. The fact that they're a student, I think we're trying to be way too particulate at this point of the conversation, and we can hash all of those details out later on.
Commissioner Delory.
Would this service qualify for pre-tax dollars being used for transit? Because right now in the federal, for Lynx and for Sunrail, you can actually ask your employer for pre-tax dollars for transit. Would this qualify? It has to be a certified transit system.
We will confirm with the vendors. I believe the answer is yes, but we will confirm that. And we had that question from some interested employers wanting to do that as well. So we will positively clarify that.
Okay.
All right, well, before we move on to the next one, on several things that were said here, I have zero illusions that there will be speed bumps and curves regardless of what we ultimately decide. And it's going to have to be monitored. It's going to have to be corrected, course corrected as necessary. There's going to be some things that we don't even know could happen that are going to be brought to our attention at some point. But what I do know is doing away with the routes at Lynx to the savings of $10 million and replacing it with a better process, arguably, I don't know that we need to talk about a whole lot of additional stuff beyond that. I mean, look, there's going to be people that are going to call and say, I used to ride the bus. We'll have no way of knowing that whether they did or not. I mean, in reality. So, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, there are going to be course corrections probably for the first year as things play out. But it is a much more nimble and much more modern way of transportation for our citizens, the vulnerable as well as the unvulnerable. So, anyhow, we'll let you move on to the next question. Thank you.
Next one is, should there be discounts for riders access on the Sunrail?
Commissioner Hurt, we'll start with you.
We have 9 more questions, so I'm going to pitch this off quick. No.
I'm a yes on that one. Commissioner Delory?
I'm going to say yes at this point.
We're paying for Sunrail. We should make sure that we get people to use it. Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
Next question, we'll start with Commissioner Lockhart.
Go ahead, Chris.
Oh, you're okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, I thought he was calling Commissioner Olga. All right, so the next one is on zone limitations, and I've got this for non-vulnerable riders, and in the sake of brevity, there's a slide back here that talks about vulnerable riders. If you want, we can just try to platoon them together if you're okay with that. I know we're getting in there, but the question becomes is how should the zones be structured? And this is really kind of a meat and potatoes question for us. So there's the single zone, which is the highest option. And what the single zone means, you get in the car, you can go from Sanford to Oviedo. There's kind of no boundaries on it. The multiple zones where, you have, you pay a higher cost structure if you go outside of the zone, but there are some zones and tethering type of things. There's the zones with the transfer where you're in a zone. If you want to go to the next zone, you get dropped off at that zone and you rebook and go again. That's a much lower cost option. And then there's the flex one, which is the one I showed you on the map, which is kind of the hybrid. These are all ways of controlling cost. The further you go and the more you open it up, the more expensive it is. Like I said, the flex zone is a lower one. The cheapest one is going to be multiple zones where you make someone get out and then rebook. And then just to give you kind of a reference, we're asking this question for both the vulnerable and the non-vulnerable riders in case you have a different opinion on that. And then we took the opportunity to look at our current routes and see how far they go before you have to take a transfer. And here's the list of the ones that we were talking about reducing, and then this is how far you can go without a transfer. Did you have anything to add, or you?
Nope.
Okay.
Okay, well, let me see if I can short circuit this a little more. When I say short circuit, make it a little more quicker as we go through this. We have 4 zones. They're asking us: single zone, multiple zone with transfer required, and flex zones. How about we just come down the dais and ask which one?
6.
No, I'm sorry, there's 4 options.
Correct.
They could have
4
multiple
options. Oh, you said
options.
4 zones. I counted 6 zones.
Oh.
Okay.
4
Yeah,
options.
Yeah.
4 options.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we'll start on your end, Commissioner Lockhart. Are you wanting single zone? Are you okay with single zone? Yes or no?
You know that I'm not going to comply with that yes or no answer question.
I'm not asking to
It's just
comply.
not going to happen. So I am between a single zone and the multiple zone with the flex. And I know that's weird because it's, if someone needs to get I'm going to be selfish and talk about Seminole State. If we need to get a student or a faculty member from Altamont to Sanford, they are not in the same zone. How does that impact that dynamic? Or if I am a patient and I live in Lake Mary and I want to get to Advent Altamont, that is not in the same zone, how would I do that? So I'm going to say single zone merely for the fact that I want people to have flexibility and the ability to move around the entire county. But if there is a way to do that without a whole lot of hubbub, that would be my secondary option.
The flex zone would just change the pricing structure. You'd get a discount for the ones in the zone, but you could do it.
But you could do it without getting kicked out and having to rebook.
That's correct.
Yes.
Okay, that's what I want.
Okay.
And just for the record, the single zone is the most expensive and is above the 9 million.
Again, it's going
Yes.
to depend on the number of vehicles, and this
I
is
know.
where it gets.
Hey, look, from my perspective, this cost is a factor. It is not the only factor, because right now, all I'm hearing from people is if I don't have a car, if I don't have the ability to get around, I can't do it in this county. And so I'm measuring in my brain not just the value of the dollar, but the value of the service and the increased quality of life to our citizens who can't currently utilize links. So I'm weighing both. I'm weighing both.
My turn. Question to you. By highest cost, to us or to the customer?
To the county.
It's going to be to the county.
To the county.
The fare structure is not going to.
Okay, but the county, but we control the cost. We don't have to we can say, use a number, 10 million, that's what we're spending on
You
this.
could absolutely do that. I mean, there's a couple ways to do this. I mean, one, you can control time. So right now, we've suggested the 30-minute pickup. You may not like that, but if it gets expensive, you can say do 60 minutes or do 60 minutes. That controls it. The number of vehicles ties to that, and then the transfer side
So
of that.
Christian, if we control the cost,
Yep.
and therefore we're also going to control, we can control the use and the cost of the program, depending upon vulnerable, non-vulnerable. I would just say single zone with a price limit, cost limit to us, and those with vulnerable, less cost, those not non-vulnerable, more cost. I mean, I think that's kind of simplistic, but that's what I would say.
Okay.
Christian, on the 3 companies that you've been talking to, has anyone done anything similar at this scale?
Yeah, so one of the companies that did Arlington, I mean, they're doing Arlington, they've got that out.
Who's the company?
It's VIA.
Okay.
That's the company that has done Arlington. So they've done that. Arlington is about the same size, density, it's a little bit larger, but they are familiar with doing this.
So in Arlington, what did they do?
They did a single zone. VIA has come back and said that they are now adding what's called dynamic fixed route to it. So that is running a minivan down primary roads and serving like links as an effort because the ridership has gotten a lot and they don't want to put extra vehicles on.
Right.
I believe as my understanding, that's very definitive what I said. So as a way to pick up service, let me rephrase it, as a way to pick up service that's not being met from vehicles that aren't there, they're looking at a dynamic fixed route to add to that. I can go back to what we were told in the meetings, is having something tethered does reduce the number of vehicles and reduce the number of
When you say
costs.
tethered, what does that mean?
So
'Cause
the
I-
zones will have certain vehicles, so like,
Assigned to 'em.
yeah, they're assigned to the zone. So with both the flex zone, they'll have maybe 5 vehicles that never leave that zone. They may have 2 that can go out of there. So if you book a thing and say, so we'll say you're here, and you want to go to not Sanford, you want to go to Oviedo. Okay, there's 2 vehicles that have the ability to leave that zone and do that. That's how the flex is. If that zone's not available, or if those aren't available, they're not gonna grab one of the tethered vehicles and go. You're gonna be in a pool based upon these roaming vehicles. So that is a way they're controlling cost with that idea, but it's still allowing you the flexibility to go multiple places.
So the other companies that you've spoken to, how have they dealt with this?
Zones with transfers controls the number of vehicles. That's the traditional microtransit method.
Can you do a hybrid where on weekends you do one system or in evenings, and then during the other time you do a type of different?
You could. I mean, obviously, this is a very customizable. I think ultimately it's going to turn into how many people are using it and whether they have enough vehicles. If they're doing transfers and the zones are fixed and you can't transfer between them, the number of vehicles is quite a bit less. So whether there would be an increased demand to swell that to a level those vehicles couldn't take it, I don't know.
Can you do zones without leaving the vehicle? Where you just do pricing differences?
Yeah, that would be the flex zone. That's the flex zone. And it just changes your fare structure. So if you're like, hey, I'm in this zone and I want to go to the next zone, then you're no longer paying a zone price, you're paying a distance price, and the price goes up. And you could make it where, okay, going 10 miles is maybe economical, and then going 15 miles, it starts getting pretty spendy. Going 20 miles, you're mortgaging the house.
Thinking about that, so I'd be more inclined to do a larger flex zone area from what you're telling me today, but that doesn't get you outside the county, because it only stays inside the county.
That's correct. That's all we're looking at. Anything we're looking at here
I
is just
understand
in
that.
the
I'm just
county.
trying to answer the question. I'm trying to
Yep.
understand what's out there.
Yep, good dialogue.
Okay.
So I'm a single zone advocate with the understanding, I understand from my briefings, and I think it's been brought up here today, we have the ability to change direction once we get started, correct? Meaning if we start out as a single zone, we see the numbers, we could go to a flex zone or multiple zone. Is that correct?
It is. I mean, we can change the directions in any direction. I would say, human nature, and I'm no expert on that. Tighter is easier to loosen than looser is more difficult to tighten. That's not always the case, but we can do whatever. If we don't have enough vehicles, or let's say we get in there and we think, hey, we've got too many vehicles, we can make adjustments however.
Right.
So it's very scalable.
So you've got one of the entities that came in under $10 million in a single zone setting with, I think, 40 vehicles.
That I believe is correct. That is correct.
We don't know at this point where 40 vehicles are actually going to be able to serve that need, but I would assume, based on their algorithms, they believe it would or could, yet to be determined. And I appreciate the direction you're wanting from us on a lot of these, but we're going to get pretty granular. So my position is, you all have done a lot of homework, you've briefed my office on it, I'm okay with whatever you all believe is the best thing moving forward with everything we've given input on, as long as we have the understanding that we can change that or shift gears accordingly to do what we're ultimately set off to do, which is replace the existing links, lines that we're doing away with a better service model.
Yep, I can work
Anything
with
above
that.
and beyond that is cream on the top. for our non-vulnerable citizens and so forth. I mean, we could talk about this for a week, about all the what-ifs, how comes, why don't you do this, why don't you try that. These people are supposed to be the experts. You've asked them to come in with their expertise. You all took it one step further, met with them deeper to try to flush out where their differences were. And frankly, I think you've done as good a job as you could have. And that's where I'm at with this whole thing. So, Commissioner Herr, I'll let you go on this one.
I'm at flex zones because I don't think you can go backwards. I think multiple zones requiring a transfer is off the table. I think that's worse than the service that we have right now. And I think if you start with flex, you could upgrade it to single. It would be harder to start with single and then reduce the service to move to flex. And I'll kick off the next question on the service schedule. In order to keep this moving, is the staff recommendation acceptable? The answer is yes for me.
Yes.
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 Yes, with the understanding that we can make modifications.
Sure.
Yeah, sure. Okay. All right. Okay, next one is maximum rider pickup wait times. Commissioner Lockhart, you want to make a go at that one?
Sure, yes, because you're going to be wherever you are, sitting in air conditioning, not outside in the weather.
Yep.
And you can schedule it ahead of time.
Again, 60 minutes sounds, if you're going one place and coming back, but I understand it's just for Sunday. I'm just going to say yes right now, because we can change it.
So if I know church starts at 9, I'm going to call for it to come at 7 or 7:30, and so I get them there at least in time so I can get to church by 9. Like you know where it is you're going and when, you know when the mall opens up or when the grocery store opens up. Like, I think people can plan for that. They can plan for that a heck of a lot better than they can with what they have now.
Correct.
Yep.
Agreed.
Yes.
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 Okay, next vehicle advertising.
Yes.
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 Move on.
The big yes, all right.
Student riders.
I think you need to be an adult.
I've already said my concern about student riders, 15-year-old.
I'm good with student riders being 15-year-olds. I think there's a lot of applications for students where they wouldn't want to be on the bus. I think I'm cooler on the bus than I am in mass transit, so I have a different view of that.
I'm a yes on student ridership as well.
Yes.
So,
I'll be the long guy that says no.
okay.
And I like
Because
that.
you've never sat in a car line.
And I like that. I like the thing where the students, when they're going to after-hour programs and things of that nature. That's where I would.
I didn't mean that.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
So let me just say, if you have a student at Oviedo High School who wants to go to a dual enrollment class at Seminole State or UCF, they will be able to do that with this.
To me,
They
that-
can't now.
To me, that's different. I'm talking about going to school.
That's not what this
15.
is.
Okay?
Yeah,
That's your interpretation. I mean, people going to school, they're not going to be, kids are going to be taking this to go to school, not dual enrollment. If it's dual enrollment, that's different.
Okay, so you're
That's not what
really
that says.
you're a yes with a caveat. You're not a no.
Right.
Because you want dual
I'm
enrollment.
answering the question. There
I'm
was no caveat.
telling you what your answer is, Bob.
I'm telling you what my answer
That's
is.
pretty clear.
I am reading the question and answering it.
Okay. Next is funding options. You want
What
to,
side does it go?
So I'll just quickly mention some options to pay for the cost of the service. First would be the reductions that we would experience for our current Link service. Second option is an additional 5-cent local option gas tax that would levy approximately $8.8 million countywide. And then there's an option to talk about distribution allocations with our cities. They would be eligible to get some of that funding. That money could go towards this service as well. Christian went over the partnerships that would potentially provide some offsetting revenue. Then we would have our fare box revenues, depending on ridership, anywhere up to $2 million, advertising opportunities, and then grants as well.
okay.
All right, so the next steps, I want to thank you all for going through this. I know it's been a pile of slides. You've had to listen to me drone on for an exceptionally long period of time, but we got good information, and I'm going to take that and go back to the vendors and then get a ranking and bring it back to you for your approval.
When do we start asking other questions?
But I wanted to, I thought this is not a question, the funding options. This is just a statement.
We can talk,
Those are potential funding options.
Okay, then I want to say something about that.
Okay.
I truly believe that the savings from the fixed route is the number one. I think we can sit there and put that at the level, whatever that is, whatever that savings is, that's the level. And then you've got the partnerships, the fare box, the advertising, and the grants. You know, when we were presented the 5-cent sales tax, or 5-cent gas tax, and the options for that, you know, we are looking at a distribution with the other cities, obviously, because we have to. But number two, I don't think this should be the option to pay for this program. I think this program, number one, should be from the savings. We decide a limit of how much from the savings in the general fund, and then we can supplement it with the other things that we get, the partnerships, the grants, the fare box, the advertising and everything. I'm not saying that we can't use that money. I'm just simply saying is I don't want it tied to it.
Gotcha.
Agreed.
Agreed. Commissioner Lockhart.
So the thing that we have kind of ignored throughout this conversation is the paratransit. Some of these rides will be converted paratransit rides, which will save us significant dollars. We're talking about $9 million in fixed route, but we're forgetting that we pay Link $17 million a year.
Right.
So the paratransit costs will convert into some of these rides. Because, right, I mean, we're eliminating some of these fixed routes, but we did not touch at all on how we envision paratransit being modified. So that's like a whole nother element of this discussion that is a savings that, not right now, but at some point, we need to incorporate it into the conversation, I think.
Some of the incorporation is going to be just seeing what it does.
Correct.
And then getting it. We're hoping that, I mean, one, it's easier, it's more convenient. We're hoping a lot of people convert. Trying to predict the conversion, even when we talked to Lynx when we were having the early, it's very difficult for anyone. You know, there are some folks that are, you know, that are used to using a certain service, so there's a reluctance. We want to get out there and market it to these folks and show that this is a better service. So it's difficult to get at that number, but we're very optimistic with that number.
For sure. I mean, yeah, to everybody's point, this is not going to be a flip the switch and it's going to be working exactly how we want it. It's going to take some time. But I think that one of the key messages to the community and anyone who's listening to this conversation is we are not going to leave anyone stranded without the ability to get to where they need to go in this community.
Correct.
You may hear, because our offices have received some phone calls and some emails, there is some misinformation, disinformation that is being spread, that Seminole County is getting rid of all of the buses and that people are not going to have any more transportation and routes are being eliminated. Yes, and. To use Commissioner Herr's phrase, yes, we are modifying and changing the way that we deliver transportation options to this community. It will not maybe be a bus anymore that picks you up, but you will have the ability to get from point A to point B and multiple points beyond better than what you are able to do today. So I just want to make sure, for those who are spreading the misinformation and disinformation, we know who you are.
Commissioner Constantine, then Delary, and we'll go right on down.
Thank you. Okay, so I just want to follow up on a few things. I mean, we talked about a lot. I'm not trying to reinvent anything. We've learned a great deal here. I mean, and we're trying to piece together something that has been in place for a long time, has served a certain segment of the population and has failed another certain segment of the population, and now we're trying to build a better mousetrap. So I applaud what we have done here. I truly do. I think this is amazing. But we, you know, as Commissioner Lockhart just said, and she didn't say it directly, but I think we're not establishing a new bus system. We're trying to build as a better mousetrap. So, you know, I know you have done, and like I said, you've learned a lot, we've learned a lot. You've gone through a lot of the dynamics and what we're really trying to accomplish here. And, you know, one of the things that I go back to sometimes things that have happened in the past that I have with the some of the institutional knowledge I have. And there was a great man, truly, who passed away recently, who was actually Nicole Guillet, our former county manager's father. He was an amazing human being. And he ran the Regional Planning Council for a long, long time when it had 60 DRIs going on at the same time, you know, when truly regional planning councils were into the land planning. And one of the things he did, there was a problem with paratransit in Central Florida, and this is late 80s. And he decided that he was going to tackle that. And the ultimate thing was you had this huge room, call-in center, this and that. I understand it was before what we have today, you know, AI and everything else. But it became a disaster, and a total disaster, and was part of the real problem that started the downfall in many cases. And again, this was a great man who did a lot of great things, and he saw a problem, he wanted to solve it. I don't want us to see a problem and try to solve it and make it worse. So I want to be very careful in how we are not only presenting this, as Commissioner Lockhart just said, because we want people to understand we're trying to do a better system, but also that we've covered everything. And you know, some of the questions that I go ahead that we haven't even discussed today is like, have we thought about our own regional transportation authority? I know we've mentioned that before, but have we really looked into it? Because that opens us up to grants and other opportunities. And we already have a multimodal transportation system in Seminole County for free. I bet it's just beginning, but you know, it's the system that Altamont Springs has. And you know, so we do have in our comp plan and in everything a multi-transit system. Is this truly going to get us the multimodal approach, which Commissioner Delory has, I've heard him say this many times, and I have said it many times also throughout my career, especially in the legislature when doing Sunrail, the multimodal system. Are we truly engaging and ensuring that we're doing a total multimodal situation? Can we transition? Because I do believe that automated cars are coming. I do believe automated transportation is coming. I bet Tom O'Hanley, who thinks it's going to happen tomorrow, I truly think it is going to come, and we have to be able to transition. And I heard long-term contracts that I want to make sure. Yeah, flying cars too. Yeah, scary you being in a flying car though.
For the sake of getting a break between
I want to move on.
I'm
I'm trying, please, these are important to me. I want to get this. Okay. Have we really engaged people that know this system incredibly well throughout the nation, like Paul Scatalis and people like that? I'm sorry?
I don't know who Paul Scatalis is.
I think that Paul Scatalis is in charge of the transit systems throughout the United States. He used to be actually the director of Links.
So I'll tell you what.
Let me finish. I just want to make sure that we're doing this. And then like you said, we can continually change the system. I see us as, you know, setting a limit, that limit being less than Links today, supplemented by the other costs or other monies that we can save, so we can increase it. But I look at this like a commercial, commercial solid waste contract. I don't think we should put all our eggs in one basket. I think we should have competition. I would think we should set the standards and the criteria of what we expect of these people, and if you meet that criteria, you can work within this system. And then you have a number of choices. You're not worried about somebody selling their software or owning the software or this or that. You're not, you can have, I'm going to use Commissioner Herr's dashboards. You could have every one of them up there, and you could have choice and competition with the citizens. I don't think that that would be, there's so many balls in the air right now in the competition. I think that would be something that actually could be of benefit and would keep us out of the system where we select one and then all of our eggs are in that one basket.
Commissioner Delory.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Leah, I think you've hit on something because I was going to bring it up as well. What we did with our solid waste, we actually had 3 zones back in the day, and now the 3 zones only have 2 providers. Have we thought about divvying up the county to multiple providers?
We said in the RFP that we were looking at 1, just because of transfers and things like that, but we could do that. We can go back to them.
I'm
and
just expounding on what Commissioner Constantine just spoke about.
If that's the flavor of the board, we can certainly do that.
But I mean, it's something that we should be looking at. There is obviously a lot more questions here than what we've been discussing. I like the idea of getting more information. Have you looked at the Transportation Master Plan on how this could potentially affect it with the additional vehicles? Because on one end, you got 20, and another end, you got 70 vehicles. If this is going to be taking off, is the vehicles going to go over 100 vehicles? I don't know. What happens when we run out of money? Because we talked about what the money we're using saving from links. If our spend rate is more than what the annual savings is, then where does that money come from, and how does that system work in perpetuity for that following year, the rest of that year? Those are some of the questions. Do we own our own data? So the data that these companies are going to be obtaining, who owns the data? In this whole system, are we talking about education of the public? What type of educational program they're going to have? Or are they just going to be off and running? And then I asked about the pre-tax dollars. And then there's more questions, but in sake of time. And then we talked about federal grants. But my real question is, what happens when you exceed the money that's allocated for links? And then with links, with the routes that we're decommissioning, so to speak, what happens to their stops and their benches? Are they required by our agreement to remove them? And then what happens with all that asset that's out there on the street? Because I don't want people sitting on a bus bench waiting for links to show up and there's nobody showing up. Because that will happen. That's it for now.
So my thought process is, again, I think staff's done a wonderful job in gathering this data. You spent a great deal of staff time interacting with these people. And again, a lot of good things have been stated here, but the initial purpose for us going down this path is to replace what we currently have in a bus service. Now, we can align that with multimodal, we can align it with other things as soon as we get on our feet. And it's going to take a time process, even with those experts that staff has met with. Again, I have no delusions that there's going to be some speed bumps, some hiccups, and I don't care how many news outlets you put it on, how much Facebook you put it on, we are going to get calls, the bus didn't come. It's just going to happen. And we're going to have to be able to deal with that, pivot, move, and make those changes. Again, there's so much opportunity to this, but if we think we want to go out and put a whole new RFP scope out there, I have zero interest in that whatsoever. We know that the budget process at Lynx has taken place. We know what the reduction is based on our staff has already met with them. What we don't know is what through the process may be additional costs that Lynx is going to have when they go into the new budget year for what we are keeping and how that may impact this. So at the end of the day, looks like to me, based on the numbers, you got about $10 million to spend, and I'm looking for the best bang for the buck for under $10 million that we're replacing for the Lynx project. Commissioner Hart.
So I'd like to start by saying that this entire opportunity to modernize mass transit in Seminole County came from Commissioner Lockhart being assigned to Lynx. So congratulations to the chairman for putting her on there, and congratulations to you for thinking, it's not outside of the box thinking, it's there is no box. Let's figure out how we build a better mousetrap. So we wouldn't be here had it not been for you challenging the status quo, and I appreciate that, and the citizens should appreciate that. I have no interest in doing multiple vendors. I think that just makes our work much more difficult, and it changes the dynamic of the vendor. They are no longer our partner. They are competitors with the other vendor, and I don't think that's what we want when we are in the learning stages of bringing on a new service into the county. We don't have a whole team of transportation experts that needs to manage this contract. So we need to pick the best possible vendor, manage the contract. I would actually say to legal, if we don't own our data in every single contract that we have out there, that ought to be a standard clause in everything that we do, not just transportation. I don't think it impacts multimodal yet. I think that if we choose the right vendor, the vendors will modify to work toward multimodal. We, in essence, are privatizing this. And so they will become more and more competitive as time goes by. With that, I think we need to move ahead. I think you need to take it back to the market to get a standardized response with the number of zones that we, I think, aligned around. I'm not sure. Good luck with that. And take it to the next step. I don't think we can afford to wait. Lynx needs to know what we're doing. Our citizens need to know what we're doing, and they need better service than they're having now.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Lockhart.
If I may. I appreciate very much the credit that you just gave me, but I'm going to pass the credit baton one more time. Because in February of 2019, I recall vividly sitting at this dais and looking at Commissioner Delary like he had two heads when he said, we need to get rid of Lynx and just move to Uber. And he wasn't wrong. He was just ahead of his time. He was too far ahead of where we were as an organization and as a community at that time. So I remembered this, it just hit me the other day, and I asked Patty if she could please find the minutes in the video from that conversation. And she did. I'm gonna forward
You were a lot
it.
younger then.
I'm going to forward it to you all so you can see it and for yourselves, because it is proof that everything old is new again.
Nothing is created.
Commissioner Delary stated he wants to see, the difference between this year and last year's quarterly reports. We had an opportunity. Commissioner Constantine was the chairman of Lynx at the time. A discussion ensued. Imagine that, regarding Uber and Lyft, and in which Commissioner Delary stated our current Lynx cost was around $7 million.
Yeah.
He questioned how many rides Lynx is doing. I'll save you the details, but we didn't know.
Still
Don't know. Fast forwarding to the very end, this board in 2019 gave the then county manager direction to look at alternative options and see what we could do, because we knew it was a runaway cost that we were not going to be able to get control of. And we are in the same situation, and we have to make a change for service reasons, for financial reasons. There are so many different things that we have pressures and responsibilities on this board, and deliveries of service that we need to make to our citizens. And with the current model, we have almost zero control other than counting routes to keep our costs under control. We are completely at a regional transportation authority's mercy. This puts us in the driver's seat. It allows us to make very quick changes and decisions for our citizens if they need to be made. And I agree wholeheartedly, we need to move forward. We do need to give Lynx an answer and let them know what it is that we're planning so that they can plan. I will throw out there, I want, and a consensus hopefully from the board, to have the county manager and his team have a very keen eye on the squishiness of the numbers. because I am concerned that when they find the routes that we are going to be changing, we may see costs increase in another area, because they're going to get their pound of flesh, or they're going to want to get their pound of flesh. And we need to be guarded against that and be protected against that, because.
You know, you have somebody else?
Nope. Go ahead, Commissioner Constantine and Commissioner Hur.
I love the squishiness, the boatload, and all the other very specific words that you're using today. The fact of the matter is, we want to make sure that we also know, though, that we're not eliminating or taking ourselves out of the regional system. We are still keeping the basic routes that we feel are important to our citizens to continue. So let's just make sure that, so nobody thinks or can go out there and write that we're trying to get, that we're trying to get ourselves out of links. We are not. We are trying to make our system in Seminole County more efficient, and at the same time using the resources that we have today to keep the routes that we think are working.
Let me expound on that, if you wouldn't mind, Mr. Chairman. We've been talking about the cost of links for a number of years and about how to be more cost-effective. We've asked them time and time again. I can't even remember how many years, because it's a number of years that we've been asking, and we've not been getting any response. And this is, with a lack of response, you have to do something, and this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
If they have a better response and they can get it under control, I'm willing to stay with links, but give us something. Give us something.
Well,
Chairman.
for me, that ship's left harbor 5 years ago. Commissioner Hur.
Given how far down the road we are, I think we need to continue to move forward, and with that in mind, I'm actually willing to make the motion to approve item number 23 to submit a grant application for the Public Transit Service Development Program of up to $10 million for the microtransit services in Seminole County.
Second.
Motion is second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, like sign?
Mr. Chairman, one more thing, and when they do bring this back, I'd like to know which companies have experiences going after grants and being successful with grants.
All three of them. All three of them have a grant writer.
Give us the history. Yes, I want to see more detail.
Okay.
Seeing none, motion carries unanimously.
Just keep going.
Okay. We'll see everybody at 1:30. We'll be in recess until then. Get a 15 or 18-minute break.